Chapter 10. Right after the sun came up, Charlie and her sisters piled into the clean car Dutch had found and headed toward the Bronx, with Dutch driving. The whole thing was not exactly what Charlie would call a good idea, but it was really all they had. Because if her aunt was right, this would be their only chance to let their Scottish kin know that they should never involve Freddie MacKilligan's daughters in Freddie MacKilligan's bullshit. If he'd really stolen money from his brothers, and Charlie was sure he had, then they should deal with Freddie directly, not try to use his daughters to get revenge. Freddie's American half-siblings already knew that, but not the Scottish ones, it seemed. Although there was still a small, sadly hopeful part of Charlie that wanted her assumptions to be wrong, that hoped this would just be a normal meeting between relatives and not a grand plot for something else. They reached the abandoned building in the Bronx, and while her sisters got out of the back seat, Charlie crouched in the open passenger doorway. "Drive down the street like you're leaving us here, and then loop back after a couple of miles, okay? Meet us on the other side of the building." Dutch nodded. "Got it." She started to stand, but he leaned in a bit and said, "Whatever you guys are doing, be careful, and be lucky." Pushing her glasses back up on her nose, Charlie couldn't help but snort. Luck is not something we MacKilligan girls ever really have. But thanks, Dutch. She stood and closed the door, walking toward the boarded-up building. Looking down both sides of the street and across it, Charlie nodded at Max, and her sister yanked off a few of the boards so they could get into the building in a different way than her sister had the day before. No one else would know they'd already been in the building to prepare for what was happening right now. Max went in first, and Charlie helped Stevie through. Once they were all inside, Charlie took the lead, heading up to the 10th floor of the building on the shaky stairs, since the elevators no longer worked. This had once been a school of some kind, and there were still desks and chairs in the classrooms. It reminded Charlie a little bit of her high school days, when she used to spend most of her time protecting her sisters. Max had been a year behind, and Stevie was about to start taking college prep classes because she'd quickly advanced out of middle school. They reached the 10th floor and entered a very large room that was once a science lab. The large, long tables and cabinets were still in place, but the equipment had been stolen or damaged by squatters over the years. One of their cousins stood at the opposite end of the room in a tailored dark suit. His black and white hair freshly cut, his black leather shoes expensive. He looked a lot like their dad, and, despite herself, Charlie held that against the men of the MacKilligan clan. She couldn't help it. "Cousin Charlie," Dougie MacKilligan greeted with that lilting accent. He was part of the Scottish side of the family, and, like their American kin, they barely acknowledged that Charlie and her sisters were related by blood, unless they needed something from them. Charlie used to think that their family acted this way because of racial prejudice. But no, it was because they were Freddie's offspring. It was Freddie they wanted to pretend didn't exist. Freddie they wished wasn't blood, and, by extension, his 3 daughters. "Long time, Dougie," she replied. He motioned them into the room. Come, let's talk." The 3 of them entered the lab, and as soon as they reached the middle of the room, they were surrounded. Not by more MacKilligans, unfortunately, but by military types, like the ones who'd already come after them. "This seems a little harsh," Charlie said to her cousin, "letting them kill us."
No, Dougie quickly corrected. "That's not what's happening here. We've worked out a lovely deal for you 3.
Max snorted. "Really?"
"Yes, cousin, really."
He held up a finger.
"One thing, though."
2 men quickly checked Charlie and Max for weapons, and Charlie was really impressed. Max didn't kill even one of them. The guy checking Charlie stepped away from her after a few seconds, but the one checking Max was still finding weapons. Dougie rolled his eyes.
"You haven't changed, Maxine."
"It's Max. Just Max." Once a small pile of knives of varying sizes sat on a lab table, Dougie continued explaining the lovely deal his father and uncles had come up with for Freddie MacKilligan's girls.
Now, we know you lot have no say in the shite your father does, and we also know that threatening any of you with death, well, to be honest,
he's not going to care, Charlie reminded him. Dougie smiled.
Exactly. But, dear Cousin Charlie, we know how persuasive you can be with your father. So this is the deal. These gentlemen will take your baby sister.
One of the men grabbed Stevie's arm and pulled her close, all the men in the room ignoring how Stevie's eyes widened and her body went completely rigid.
But, and this is an important but, they're not going to kill you, and they will never hurt her. In fact, you'll even be able to get her back.
His eyes locked on Charlie's.
Once me da gets his money and she helps out our associate.
He spread his arms, palms up, smile wide.
That seems fair, don't you think?
You really think you can trust these men? Charlie asked, a little disgusted by her cousin.
They want one thing. They want Stevie.
Me? Stevie demanded, her panicked voice hitting new notes that had the wolf in Charlie nearly howling. What did I do? Why do you want to kill me? She screamed hysterically. Dougie's eyes crossed and he raised his hand toward Stevie.
No one wants to kill you. You are safe. You cooperate and your sisters cooperate. Everyone will be fine.
Do you really believe that? Charlie asked her cousin.
Not everyone's like your father. I made the deal. It's solid. Just don't do anything stupid.
But we're MacKilligans. All we do is stupid things. And I can't let them take my sister. The door leading to the lab suddenly closed, and one of the men stood in front of it. Charlie smirked. Do you really want to play it this way, gentlemen?
Charlie,
her cousin said, his voice calm,
don't do this.
He stepped closer and whispered,
These men may be full human, but even a honey badger can't handle a shot to the head. And once they get over the shock of your shifting, that's exactly what they'll do. Shoot you in the head, and they'll still take your sister.
I don't shift, Charlie whispered to her cousin, before moving away and saying loudly, but I will say that my sweet baby sister has been off her meds for almost 24 hours now. Unable to help herself, Charlie smiled. And Stevie is anxious. They both had their rifles aimed at the building across the street, using their scopes to see what was happening inside the old lab classroom. They'd been sitting here since before dawn, to make sure they didn't miss anything, but they didn't plan to kill anyone unless necessary. Their task was to observe and report to their bosses. The problem for Deanne, though, was that she didn't rightly know what the fuck she was observing.
This just went bad, Deanne said to Malone. I don't like that they've locked them girls in with them.
Me neither.
Then let's start picking them off.
No, Malone said coldly. Observe and report. That's it. We're just here to see what they do.
Don't seem right. They're outnumbered, outgunned.
I know, but they're not our problem. Badgers say they take care of their own. We should believe them.
Then why are we here?
For something new. So could you just calm the fuck down, hillbilly?
Their deaths will be on your head, Deanne muttered before returning her gaze to the scope.
Dougie moved from in front of the window. He wouldn't put it past his crazy American cousins to have someone on another building with a rifle and a scope, ready to start shooting them all. And to think he'd volunteered for this job, wanting to help his father and to keep things from spiraling out of control. But could anything that involved Freddie MacKilligan not spiral out of control? It didn't seem so. Still, he didn't think these 3 little honey badgers would be that much of a problem. They had no weapons, and although they could shift and start tearing into these men, they'd only end up getting shot in the head, and that would be that. He couldn't see the oldest one taking such a risk. She was so protective of the other 2. Everyone in the family knew that about Freddie's girls. But even though Dougie waited, his cousins didn't shift. The oldest two did nothing but stand there, watchful but seemingly unafraid. The youngest, though, was panting and desperately trying to wiggle out of her captor's hold. Max pointed at the man holding her sister and warned, "I'd let her go if I were you." The man only smirked as he slammed a syringe in the girl's neck and pressed the plunger down. That had been stupid. The human men in this room didn't understand that to drug a honey badger was a wasted effort. It might knock that thin little thing out for about 20 seconds, but beyond that? Stevie didn't even stagger, though. Instead, screaming, she slapped at the man's hand. Problem was, he still had the syringe buried in her neck. The needle broke off and stayed embedded in her flesh. Not that she felt it. Not as crazy as she was acting. Dougie had heard Stevie was the high-strung one, but her distraught screaming and the way she yanked herself free from the man stunned him and everyone else in the room. Except her sisters, it seemed. "You're trying to kill me!" Stevie hysterically accused the man. "You're trying to kill me!" Had no one taught this girl anything? Did she not listen? Not only could some bullshit drug not hurt a honey badger, but she was the one they wanted alive. The last thing they were trying to do was kill her. One would think she'd be more concerned about her sisters, but she seemed overly involved with herself. Bent over at the waist, one hand on her upper chest, Stevie panted out, "I can't breathe! I can't breathe! My lungs are shutting down!" Dougie gestured to a bland-faced Charlie. "Are you going to do something about this, or just let the poor girl give herself a heart attack for nothing?" "All right," Charlie said, rubbing her nose. "I'll do something." She glanced at her sister. "Max." Max grabbed the arm of the man closest to her. She yanked it out straight and shoved her free hand, palm up, forward, breaking the man's forearm into 2 pieces. That man's scream had the others scrambling to take the safeties off their weapons. Clearly their earlier agreement no longer in effect. Not that Dougie blamed them. The 2 girls would die because their judgment was just as bad as their soon-to-be-dead fathers and hysterical baby sisters. Charlie scrambled over one of the lab tables, but bullets slammed into her back, sending her flipping forward. With a grunt of pain, she disappeared on the other side of the table, and Max grabbed a blade from one of the men's leg holster. She cut the inside of the man's thigh, then his throat, before diving behind a nearby pillar. Bullets tore into the concrete seconds after she disappeared. Stevie's breathing was so hard now, Dougie was sure she was truly going to give herself a stroke. And sadly, she'd witnessed Charlie getting shot in the back. So now she was screaming, "Charlie! Oh my God! They killed Charlie! We're all going to die!" Shrieking and crying, she shoved past 2 men trying to grab hold of her and dove face first behind a lab table. As one sister disappeared, another reappeared. Max and her stolen blade came up behind another man. She cut his throat and slammed the blade into the neck of the man standing beside him. A new attacker grabbed her from behind, big arms pinning hers to her body. She rammed her foot hard on his instep. Twice, then bent her knee and brought her foot back against the man's knee, breaking it. Another aimed a gun at her and began firing. Max turned hard, bringing the one holding her along for the ride, so his back became her shield. By the time he hit the floor, he was dead from friendly fire. Dougie sighed and reached for his phone. He quickly texted his father, "It's all gone to shite da." Something his father would not like. But what could Dougie do? Bullets flashed past Dougie, but he only moved his head slightly to the left to avoid getting shot. His phone vibrated, letting him know his father had texted him back. But as he was about to read the message, Charlie appeared behind one of the men blindly shooting at the room, trying to kill Max, who'd managed to brutally knife 6 more men so far. Charlie grabbed the man from behind, trying to get his gun. But one of the man's cohorts came to his rescue, putting a gun to her forehead. She grabbed that gun, though, with both hands and turned her body into the man's. Then she pulled the trigger for him, shooting the first man twice in the head. She aimed and shot another and another. Slamming her foot into the instep of the man she was struggling with, she pulled out of his grip with his gun still in her hand. She shot him twice, in the head. She dropped the empty magazine, reached down and took another mag from the man she'd just killed, shoved the full mag into the gun, put a round in the chamber, and turned to find a .45 aimed at her. As the shooter pulled the trigger, Max came from underneath him, shoving his arms up so the shot went wild. Then she finished him with a blade across the throat. That's when they all froze. Even his two cousins, which was what made Dougie a tad concerned. Nothing had fazed them so far, so what would exactly? It started out like a low rumble. Then it became a roar. A big cat roar. Orange, white, and black striped paws the size of massive platters landed on the lab table, crushing the thick slab of granite under the weight of each paw, like someone putting their hands in snow. Then the biggest honey badger head Dougie had ever seen appeared. "Oh, fuck," Dougie whispered. While they all stared, Stevie's shifted form began to rise, and rise, and rise, until her head nearly reached the ceiling. And even then, Dougie got the distinct feeling that she wasn't standing completely straight yet, that she was still bent over. Staring down at the remaining men, Stevie suddenly leaned forward and roared, shattering the windows throughout the room and, Dougie was sure, the entire building based on the screams he could hear from outside. No longer thinking about the women kicking their asses, the men aimed their guns at the thing bearing rows of massive fangs at them, honey badger fangs that were quadrupled in size. Then Stevie did something Dougie didn't expect from any badger or cat, because they weren't physically capable. She charged up the wall and onto the ceiling. All 20 or so feet of her hung from the ceiling tiles. Her long tail snapped down and wrapped around the neck of one of the men, tossing him across the room and out the shattered window. "Kill it!" one of the men bellowed, and the rest began firing. Stevie skittered across the ceiling until she reached the man who'd given the order. She landed on him, grabbing the wailing man in her maw and dragging him off to the far corner of the lab, ignoring the bullets and screams of the other men. And while Stevie had their full attention, her sisters, without shifting or unleashing their claws, went around killing. Max stuck with the blade, but now she had two, one in each hand. She moved fast and quiet. With no mercy, she killed. Her sister stayed with the .45, moving through the remaining men with the weapon held in both hands, raised to eye level, but held close to her body. Each of her victims got a headshot, unless the male tried to move on her first, in which case she shot twice in the chest and then in the head. As for Stevie, all Dougie could hear were screams. All he could see was her back arching each time she pulled more flesh from bone. Some men managed to make it out the door, climbing over each other. No longer were they a smart, elite unit of killers. Not after meeting the MacKilligan sisters. Dougie heard sirens and glanced out the window next to him. "Cops!" he yelled at Charlie. She shot another head before she looked at him and nodded. "Go," she told him, not even out of breath. No fear or panic or even anger in her dark brown eyes. "And tell Uncle Will we said hi." Max started to go after the men who'd managed to get out the door, but Charlie called her back. "We have to get Stevie." Max glanced around at the carnage. "Where the fuck is she?" Charlie pointed up and, yep, that's where their baby sister was. Again hanging from the ceiling, but now with part of some guy hanging from one of her fangs. A part she was not going to want to give up. Shifted Stevie tended to play with her prey, and guard it territorially, like most house cats. "Dude," Max told her sister, "we don't have time to calm her down." "I've got it." Charlie moved closer to her sister, but not right under her, because she didn't want any more blood dripping on her. "All right, you," she said, pointing a finger at her sister. "You get down here right now. Right now, Stevie MacKilligan. This instant." Stevie lowered her eyes and made a little mewling sound. She took a step back, still on the ceiling, not wanting to give up her prize. "Don't you dare run away from me, Stevie. You come down here right now. This minute." Stevie released her grip on the ceiling and came crashing to the floor. "Spit it," Charlie ordered her baby sister. "Spit it." Annoyed, Stevie spit the torso out of her mouth. "Shift back to human. Right now." With just a thought, Stevie returned to her human form. Now naked and covered in blood, she stood there, eyes downcast. It wasn't shame, though. Charlie knew that. It was more like contrition, like a little girl caught tearing the head off her sister's favorite doll. "Cops are securing the building and coming up the stairs," Max announced after checking the windows. "Let's move." The three of them ran out of the lab and up the stairs until they reached the roof. There was a long summer dress already waiting on the ledge of the building. Max tossed it to Stevie, and she slipped it on while Charlie went from corner to corner, trying to figure out where the cops had set up. She found that they hadn't made it to the back of the building yet, so she motioned her sisters over. "Go," she ordered Stevie. "Have you lost your mind?" Stevie asked, already beginning the panic process all over again. "When you consider the physics of—" Pressing her hand against Stevie's chest, Max shoved her sister off the roof. Screaming, Stevie fell, but as she neared the ground, she suddenly turned over and landed on all fours. "Always with the drama," Max announced before following her sister over. Sadly, she didn't have any cat in her, so she landed hard, the concrete under her cracking from the impact. But the honey badger still got to her feet and shook it off. Charlie got on the ledge and was preparing to jump when she felt eyes on her. She spun around, gaze searching all the nearby buildings. She saw the scopes, the rifles, the women holding them. She bared her fangs in rage, and in answer, the dark-haired one bared her fangs back. Well, at least they were shifters. "Charlie!" Max yelled. "Move your ass!" She knew she couldn't deal with this right now, but she mentally filed it away for later, because she had a fear it would come flying back at her at some point. Charlie jumped, aiming for an abandoned car. Her shoulder hit the roof, and she immediately rolled down and off the car. She tried to shake her shoulder out, but it was too damaged. "Move!" Max barked. Charlie started running, ignoring the "Stop, police!" behind her. She dove into the open front door, and Dutch hit the gas. His turn was so wild the passenger door closed on its own, and he was moving. The way the car handled, Charlie knew Dutch had picked it just for this sort of thing, getaways, proving once again that he was no good for her sister. He was useful, no doubt about it, but he was also trouble. Grateful for the man's driving skills, Charlie held on as Dutch got them away from the cops before they could dispatch a helicopter to follow them. A good thing, since Charlie wouldn't put it past Max to handle a police helicopter the same way she'd handled the chopper in Switzerland. "Do you know you've been shot?" Max said from the back seat. Charlie spun around, resting on her knees to stare at her baby sister. "Stevie, you've been shot?" Stevie blinked at her. "She was talking to you." Frowning, Charlie looked down at herself, but saw nothing except her wounded shoulder, and she just needed to get Max to yank that back into place for her. Max leaned forward, reached around her, and when she sat back, she held up 2 fingers covered in blood. "Oh, guess I was shot." After a moment, she dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "It's a scratch. It'll be fine." Charlie settled back in her seat and looked at Dutch. "We need to get rid of this car." "Already on it, sweetness." She gritted her teeth. "Don't call me that." "Honey pie? Lady divine? Pretty ass?" Charlie glared at him. "You're taking advantage of the fact that I owe you, aren't you?" Dutch laughed. "Of course I am." Chapter 11. John Mitchell disconnected the call and stared, shocked, at the closed door leading to the cockpit of the private jet. Being in this business for as long as he had, he'd heard all sorts of things, seen all sorts of things. But this... He looked over his shoulder at the luxury jet. His clients were all the way in the back, spending time in their personal tanning beds. Apparently, they didn't worry too much about skin cancer. John headed through the roomy jet. He hadn't been in a jet this luxurious since his military days when he was lucky enough to work on Air Force One. His clients had serious money and were not afraid to use it. For anything. The two ladies were already out of the tanning beds, both wrapped in white terry-cloth robes, their personal staff giving them pedicures and manicures, while others massaged their shoulders.
"Excuse me, ladies," he said, stepping into the cabin. "I have word."
One looked up from her copy of Italian Vogue, and he realized they both had green mud smeared all over their faces. It was not attractive. "They have her?" she asked with that Italian accent he was starting to find less sexy and more irritating.
"They killed everyone," he said plainly, "except their cousin and about 3 of my men who managed to escape."
"How is that possible?"
She threw her magazine, frustrated.
"Why does this keep happening?"
"Calm," the other ordered. And to John she said, "Now, what happened?"
"I'm not quite sure. My man talked about fangs and claws and giant tigers."
Both women laughed.
"What?"
"I think they must have drugged the men," he reasoned. "Some hallucinogenic. That made it easier to shoot and stab them all."
"So we do not have the youngest?" one asked.
"No, ma'am, we don't."
The pair stared at each other through all that mud until one shooed away their staff and the other took out a slim gold case. She opened it and pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and focused on him.
"You failed. Again. You and the people you've hired. That makes us unhappy. You don't want to keep making us unhappy, do you?"
"Of course not."
"Then you," she said, pointing her cigarette at him, "will arrange a jailbreak for us."
"A jailbreak?"
"I think that is the term, yes. We will be hiring someone who understands the MacKilligans better than you do, and I'm guessing hate them as much as we do."
She took a drag off her cigarette before asking,
"Think you can handle that, Mr. Mitchell?"
"I can handle that."
"Good,"
she said, relaxing back with a sigh.
"I'd hate to kill you, too."
Berg sat on his front stoop, attempting to pry his sister's favorite towel from his dog's mouth.
"Give it to me, now."
His sister had been right. Taking the dog his mother had given her triplets had been a bad idea. Not that he didn't like dogs. He did. Sort of. And he'd grown up around them. His mother dabbled sometimes in breeding the enormous canine so that local bears could have the extra protection. But these dogs were strong-willed and, to be blunt, bitchy. They were often used in Russian prisons to keep the convicts in line.
"She's going to kick both of our asses if you don't give me this towel."
"Hi, Berg." Berg looked up from the tugging dog to see Charlie's sister standing in front of him.
"Hi, Stevie. What happened to your neck?"
"Oh, nothing. It's already healing. But I was wondering if you have a first aid kit."
"Sure."
He leaned back and yelled through the screen door,
"Dag, get the first aid kit." "Which one?"
Dag called back. Berg focused on Stevie again.
"What do you need it for? A sprain, a cut, your neck?"
"Gunshot wound," she replied casually. So casually that Berg didn't realize he was yelling,
"Gunshot wound!"
to his brother until his brother yelled back,
"Who the fuck was shot?"
Was all she got out before Berg dropped the towel and charged over to what the rest of the neighborhood was now calling the Badger House. He ran inside and bellowed,
"Charlie!"
She appeared in the hallway wearing nothing but her blood-soaked jeans and bra. Her shoulder appeared weirdly fucked up. "What are you yelling for?" she asked calmly, frowning.
"You were shot?"
She waved it off. "Oh, that. Yeah, I'm fine."
"You're covered in blood."
"Covered is a bit of an exaggeration, wouldn't you say?"
"No."
She came close and whispered,
"If you're going to get hysterical—"
"I'm not hysterical. You've been shot."
"You were shot in Milan. You didn't get hysterical."
"I'm a bear."
"Uh-huh.
which means a 45 isn't going to do anything to me except piss me off.
What about bear spray? Does bear spray work?
Why are you asking?
Why aren't you telling?
Dag ran into the house, a giant metal white box gripped in his big hands. He froze when he saw Charlie. "Oh my God," he gasped. "You're dying."
Charlie's eyes crossed. Can we all calm down? There's no need to be hysterical.
How are we hysterical?
Berg asked. By running in, assuming I'm dying.
You are drenched in blood, Berg reminded her.
And your shoulder looks really weird,
Dag flatly added. That just needs to be yanked back into place. She scratched her chin. And a little duct tape on the gunshot wounds will stop the bleeding.
You're not a headlight on an old Chevy, Berg told her.
She rolled her eyes, but before she said anything, she suddenly sniffed the air. I got a pie in the oven. Wait here. Charlie walked away, and Berg looked at his brother. Together they headed toward the kitchen behind Charlie, but Berg's dog ran in first, his sister's towel still caught in his mouth. He stopped in front of Berg and stood there, being annoying.
You are killing me. Is that Britta's Restoration Hardware towel?
Dag shook his head.
She's gonna kick your ass.
Good, Stevie said from behind them, and loudly. You have the kit. To be honest, Berg had forgotten about Charlie's little sister. Looking at her now, he saw something different about her. First, she was speaking to them without either of her sisters being there. Second, her eyes were open really wide, like she was perpetually stunned by something. Third, back to the talking. She was talking. A lot. And fast. Thanks for loaning us this first aid kit, she said, taking the kit from Dag. We really appreciate it, but wow, is it big. I'm really surprised how big it is. Do you guys get injured that much that you need such a big case? We do, of course, but that's not surprising. I mean, just today Charlie got shot, but that was before what happened. Not that I blamed them. It was either them or us, and so her and Max had to kill all those men. I mean, if they hadn't, no matter what our cousin said, they probably would have held me for a long time and killed both my sisters. So, yeah, Charlie and Max totally had to kill them all. Sorry if I'm talking fast. I sense I'm talking fast. But I just took my meds and they haven't kicked in yet. But when they do, I'll be way calmer. But at least I'm not afraid of you guys right now. But I always feel better after I shift. The problem is that no one else feels better after I shift, right? Then she laughed, patted Berg on the arm, and reminded him, Straight dog it, before disappearing down the hallway toward the kitchen. Stunned, the brothers stood there, silent. Because, really, what was there to say? Ignoring the excruciating pain in her shoulder, Charlie quickly put her glasses back on before she bent down and, with oven mitts on, pulled the lemon custard pie out of the oven and placed it on the counter to cool. She smiled at its perfection. Bear in the kitchen, Max said, and Charlie turned around, expecting to see the Dunn brothers behind her. But no, it was that dog. He's going to eat my pie, isn't he? She asked Max. If you leave it on that counter, he will. Charlie moved the pie to the open window, pretty sure the dog couldn't lean that far over to reach it. But that's when Max reminded her, You're gonna attract bears again. Damn it. Holding the pie in her hands, she studied the kitchen. Max looked up from the newspaper she was weirdly reading. Weirdly, because it was an actual newspaper, made of actual paper. Charlie had only seen her use her phone the last 10 years to read anything. Books, magazines, anything. Charlie didn't even know where her sister had found a newspaper. You could just get rid of the dog, Max said. I'm not killing a dog. Max quickly looked up, eyes blinking. I meant throw him out, not kill him. Aw, I'm glad that's what you meant, she happily replied. Max glared at her before going back to the paper. That's when Stevie walked into the kitchen. Who's killing a dog? Stevie looked down at Max. Why are you killing a dog? I'm not... Max suddenly stopped talking and stared at Stevie. Were you outside talking to those bears? No. Good. And I'm not killing any... I was inside talking to those bears. Max closed her eyes and Charlie asked her baby sister, What did you say to them?" "I don't really remember because I was talking so fast. And you know what happens when I'm off my meds and start talking. I just go and go and go. And I kind of just kept going without really stopping because you know how I get when I'm not on my meds, but I've panic shifted. And I may have told them nothing. But then again, I may have told them everything. I'm really not sure, but—" With pie still in hand, Charlie ran out of the kitchen and returned to the living room to find both bears just standing there, staring at each other. "Pie," she announced, shoving it under their noses. "Lemon custard. Bet you two like that. Want it? You can have it. Take it." Berg gazed at the pie and then her before asking, "So, how many people did you kill?" Charlie cringed. They should have locked Stevie in her room, but she could claw her way out if she was anxious enough. "It's not what you think," she promised. "So you didn't kill a bunch of people?" "Not like that. Like we went on a murder spree. They were trying to take our sister, and they weren't afraid to get rid of me and Max to make it happen. What did you want us to do?" "It's not what you did, Charlie. I don't know what you did or why you did it. What I do know is that you've probably attracted a new problem to you and your sisters." "A new problem? What kind of new problem?" The two look-alike males simultaneously blew out a breath and looked away from her gaze. "All right, bitches, we have a problem," she yelled toward the kitchen. "I thought we killed our problem," Max yelled back. "Apparently that wasn't effective. Is it Stevie's fault?" Charlie frowned at Max's question. "No. So I can't hit her? Because I feel like hitting her." "Don't hit Stevie." Charlie looked back at the two bears and asked, "So what do we do now?" Berg held up a finger because Dag was on the phone. He grunted a few times and disconnected. "They're heading this way," he said to his brother. "Who's heading this way?" Charlie asked, but the bears ignored her. "Who did they send?" Berg asked Dag. Dag scowled. "A smith." Berg took an abrupt step back, like he'd been struck. "We have to get them out of here." "And take them where?" "Someplace with a lot of people. Smiths don't like to strike with an audience." Knowing the brothers were so busy talking to each other they were completely ignoring her, Charlie headed back into the kitchen. Max had poor Stevie in a chokehold and was telling her, "Sleep, just go to sleep. Shh." Charlie walked across the kitchen and placed the pie she was still holding onto the windowsill. "We have to get out of here," she told her sisters. "Why?" Max asked, still choking a pissed-off Stevie. But despite Stevie's very narrow frame, she was really hard to choke out, like most honey badgers. The way she was clawing at Max's arms, though, that was all cat. "Apparently we've gotten some attention from—" "I don't know. The bears, maybe. They didn't specify, but somebody. Did they give you a name?" "All they said was a smith, which I found quite vague." "There are two sets of smiths in this world," Max said. Charlie frowned. "I'm sure there are more than two. One set are Wolverines," she went on, "but they'd never come after us because of Dutch. And then there's the Smith Pack that, I believe, is crazy enough to come after us." "Smith Pack?" Charlie thought for a moment. "Didn't Gramps mention them once?" Max nodded. "He said we were never to date or have pups with them, or he would, without a doubt, disown us." "Disown us from what? He got nothing. Just his love." "Oh, shut up." She looked at her still bleeding shoulder. "I need a clean t-shirt and jeans, and would you let her go?" Max released Stevie, who spun around on her knees and began slapping at her giggling sister. "You were such a bitch!" "Stevie!" Charlie barked, pulling on a fresh pair of jeans and a navy blue t-shirt. "We don't have time for this." Stevie got to her feet, pointing her forefinger at Max. "I hate you. I'm trying to help you." "Shut up." She faced Charlie. "What's happening now?" "Find your backpack. We're getting out of here." "Okay." When it came to being on the run, Stevie had learned over time to simply follow orders. She pointed at Max. and you can bandage up my gunshot wounds on the drive out of here." The bears walked into the kitchen as Max reached under the kitchen table and pulled out a sawed-off shotgun she'd stashed there, along with many other weapons she had under the kitchen table, in the cabinets, under and around the beds, beneath the dining room table, the living room couch, the end tables. Max didn't leave what she called basic home defense to chance. The bears froze in the doorway. "That's not legal," Dag noted. "You're so cute," Max said with a smile, pushing past both males. "We have a place you can go," Berg said to Charlie. She shrugged. "What's the point if they're just going to chase us down? Better to face them here." "You don't want to face down a Smith." "I don't know what that means." "And my goal," he went on, "is to work out an agreement that will allow you to stay here safely, without worry. But I can't do that if you're having a gunfight on the street with the Smiths." Max walked back into the kitchen with a box of shells, although the shotgun was already loaded. Max just wanted to make sure she had extra. "We could win a gunfight." Berg glared down at her. "That's not helping." Max grinned and looked at her sister. "What do you think?" Charlie dug her hands into her hair and said to Berg, "I hate dragging you deeper into this." Berg patted her shoulder. "That's sweet, Charlie. But who gives a shit right now? You've got a Smith on your ass." "Is it really that big a deal?" Dag leaned over his brother's shoulder. "It's that big a deal." Stevie, her backpack securely on, her eyes wide, pointed at the window behind Charlie. "Someone just took your pie." Charlie glanced back and saw that, yeah, her pie was gone. "The dog?" she asked. "Nah," Max pointed. "He's under the table. After he opened the fridge, took out leftover steaks from yesterday, and dragged the entire pan under the table to eat." Berg crouched and snarled, "Get home." The entire table moved a few feet when the dog stood up while still under it, lifting it off the ground with his back. Stevie grabbed and held it, allowing the dog to keep going. "What's his name?" Max asked Berg. "Who?" "The dog's." "Oh, You didn't name your dog?" Charlie demanded. "Can we please go?" Berg asked. "Before the gunfight?" Shaking her head, Charlie took a 9mm out from under the kitchen table and tucked it into the back of her jeans. She pulled on a light denim jacket to hide it and, tisk-tisking the entire time, walked past the two bears, her sisters following her. "You're welcome," Berg said from behind her. "I didn't thank you yet," she reminded him. "And keep that attitude going, I may never." The women walked out of the kitchen and Berg scratched his head. That's when he saw his brother staring at him. What the fuck have you gotten us into?" Dag asked. "What are you talking about? There has to be an easier way to get a date. That's not what this is about. We're being helpful." "Do they need help? Because they don't really seem like they do." "With Smiths coming here, of course they need our help." The sisters suddenly walked back in, Charlie still leading the way. "Car just pulled up in front of the house," Charlie said. "Dutch is gone. We'll need to steal a car." "I can do that," Max announced, marching by. Berg grabbed the shotgun she still held, quickly aiming it toward the ceiling. Once he was sure no one would accidentally get shot, he calmly asked, "Can you grab something a little less conspicuous?" "Oh, sure," she said with a big, friendly smile. She released her grip on the shotgun and moved to the kitchen table. She reached under and came out with a .45. "A Desert Eagle is less conspicuous." "Than a shotgun?" "Yeah." Berg continued to stare at her until she rolled her eyes and said, "Fine." She dropped the gun on the table and went to the cabinet under the sink. She pulled out a strap with several holsters on it. Each holster held a knife. Stevie lifted up her sister's T-shirt and Max strapped the knives around her torso. Then she tacked a few more holstered knives to her jeans, and Stevie let the T-shirt drop. "Okay," Max said with that pretty smile. "Let's go. I've got a car to steal."
Or we can just borrow Mrs. Fitzbayer's car. Nice elderly sow who lives one street over, and she lets me and Dag borrow it all the time."
Max's smile faded away. "Fine, but just so we're clear, I find that really boring."
"Sorry."
"It's all right. I'm just letting you know." Max walked out the back door, leaving the brothers with Stevie. She gave them a small half-smile. "Sorry about earlier," she said, "but my medication has finally kicked in. I'm calmer, and I amped up the dosage a little bit, so I don't find you nearly as terrifying."
"Great, Stevie."
She cleared her throat. "But, should you suddenly decide you have to eat me, I have bear spray in my backpack. A proprietary mixture of my own that will burn the eyes from your head." She patted Berg's arm. "I'm not saying I'll use it. I'm just saying it's there, in case you have any terrifying ideas involving me. Okay?" Berg nodded.
"Okay."
"Excellent. Very good." She turned and rushed after her sisters, her overstuffed backpack so heavy and Stevie so thin it looked as if she should topple over. But she didn't, because none of the MacKilligan sisters were quite what they appeared. Berg didn't bother to look at his brother. What was the point? He didn't need to see him to hear him clearly.
"I'm telling Britta what an idiot you are."
Chapter 12. Deanne came down the stairs of the large house and went into the kitchen where Malone was. "Looks like they're gone." Malone grinned. "You're gonna love this." She suddenly tipped the kitchen table onto its side. Holstered guns and knives were duct-taped to the underside. "That seems like a lot." "You think?" Malone laughed. "These are your kind of girls, Smith. They've got weapons." She raised her hands, forefingers up, and made a circle in the air, all over this house. In cabinets, behind doors, under beds, next to beds, in beds. I'm trying to figure out where they got all this shit. We need to find these girls. Malone lifted her nose, sniffed the air, then opened her mouth wide, pulled back her lips, and stuck out her tongue. She'd done it before when they were tracking. She called it a flamin' response. But Deanne just called it nasty, because that's what it was, just nasty. Malone closed her mouth and made a smacking sound. "There were bears here," she announced. "There are bears everywhere. It's a bear neighborhood, genius. I mean, there were bears here, in this space, and one of them was hot for one of those girls." "How do you know that?" "Pheromones." She made that tongue-sucking against the roof of her mouth sound again. "I can taste it in the back of my throat." Deanne held up her hand and told Malone, "You cats are just plain nasty." Malone walked across the room and stared out the window. If he likes her, he'll want to protect her. "None of those girls need nobody protecting them." "You know how guys are, though, especially bears." She looked at Deanne over her shoulder. "And there are 2 places they'd probably think of taking them. But one of those places they can't risk yet. So that leaves the other." She nodded. "Yeah, I think I know where they took the girls." Malone was so cocky Deanne couldn't help but ask, "What, Malone? You fuck a bear on the regular and you think you know what all other bears will do?" Malone thought a moment before replying, Yes, I do. And do you know why, Air Bud? Because I am awesome." She giggled. "God, I love me. Don't you love me?" "No."
"Go,"
Berg said to Charlie from the front seat of Mrs. Fitzbayer's Hummer.
"We'll park the car and be right in. Don't talk to anybody or go anywhere. Just stay in the lobby, okay?"
"Okay." Charlie opened the back door and climbed out of the enormous vehicle. Of course, after seeing the elderly sow who owned this behemoth, she understood why the woman needed it. She had to be nearly 7 feet tall. Charlie had made the assumption she was a lonely old maid. But nope. She was a widow whose polar bear husband had been nearly 8 feet tall,
and together they'd had 6 giant children who were scattered all over the world trying to help with global warming to assist the full-blood polar bears trapped on melting ice caps. She was really starting to find this shifter life interesting. Living with a pack that barely noticed her, was terrified by Max, and a little freaked out by Stevie, hadn't really shown Charlie the entire shifter world that existed out there. All this was new to her. They made their way into the sports center's main lobby. Kids with basketballs or ice skates pushed past Charlie and her sisters, all rushing to their practices. There were sports stores of all kinds and restaurants on the first floor. The ice rink was also on this floor. But the basketball courts, gymnastic practice rooms, and some admin offices were up on floors 2 through 18. There was also a state-of-the-art high-end gym that probably cost a small fortune to join, and a bunch of sports physicians and surgeons who probably only worked on Olympic athletes and pro ballers.
"Wow," Stevie gasped, her gaze raised to the high ceiling. "All this for sports?"
"Sports is big business," Charlie noted, "and this is what big business buys."
"All this money, but scientists still have to beg for funds in the search to end cancer."
She shook her head, lips pursed.
"Disgusting."
Now that Stevie was back on her meds, she was once again rational, if a little nervous. Thankfully, Charlie wasn't so easily spooked. She didn't have time, always too busy keeping her sisters safe or stopping them from doing something stupid. A group of laughing girls walked by, roller skates hanging from the bag one of them held.
"Hey, look," Max pointed out. "Derby girls."
"You want to play derby?" Charlie asked, surprised. Max was not exactly a team player.
"Oh, God, no. But I do love watching them beat the shit out of each other."
She began to follow.
"Come on, let's see if we can find out if there are any bouts coming up."
"We're supposed to wait for the guys," Stevie reminded her.
"We'll be gone 2 minutes. Come on."
They followed the fast-moving women expertly cutting through the crowd until they disappeared into a stairwell guarded by 2 security guards. "Okay, we're done," Charlie said, grabbing Max's arm and holding her back.
"Why?"
"Whatever is going on back there, I don't want to know." Max pulled her arm away.
"Don't be such a drag."
"How are we supposed to get past security?" Stevie asked.
"Leave it to me,"
Max said, with way more confidence than either of her sisters felt for her. She sauntered up to the 2 guards and smiled.
"Hey."
The 2 men looked at her with no real expression. The nose of one twitched, and he suddenly opened the door, holding it for them. Max walked in, and Charlie ran after her. Stevie slipped in right behind.
"What was that?"
Charlie demanded, catching her sister's arm.
"Apparently I'm really good at being sultry."
Charlie stopped her sister and pulled her around to face her. "But, honey, you're not good at being sultry."
"She's right," Stevie agreed. "Actually, your sultry is almost threatening."
"Gee, thanks," Max muttered. She shook her head.
"Look, let's just go explore a little. It'll take forever for the guys to find a parking spot around here. 5 minutes.
"I'm concerned the stairs only go down," Stevie pointed out. "Are we going to a morgue?"
"Why would there be a morgue in a sports center?" Charlie asked. "Because Soylent Green is people."
"I am so sorry I let you see that movie," Charlie sighed.
Come on, come on."
Max started down the stairs, and they followed. "Aren't you a little concerned," Charlie asked, "that there was security at the door?"
"Why would I be? They were shifters."
"They were?"
Max stopped and faced her. "I thought you got your allergy meds."
"I did, and Stevie introduced me to a new nasal spray sent from those German doctors. So far, it's really good."
"And yet you couldn't smell—" "I don't go around smelling people, Max. Sometimes they smell funky." "You don't go around smelling. It's just— you just—"
Stevie walked past them and headed toward the door on the next floor.
"She doesn't get it, Maxie. I don't know why you go on so about it." "But we're shifters."
"Would you stop screaming that?" Charlie snapped. "We don't know who's around here."
"Hey, guys!"
Stevie called out. She now stood in front of the open door, staring out at something. "You may want to check this out." Charlie went down the stairs and stopped behind Stevie. She was taller than her sister, so she could look over her head. It was another lobby, like the one on the first floor. There were restaurants, stores, and people dressed for the sport of their choice. But there was a distinct difference between this lobby and the one on the floor above. It was the energy, and it took a moment for her to understand what this all reminded her of. But then it hit her, like a lightning bolt. A watering hole in Africa, one where all the local animals had to go to get a drink. Lions, gazelles, giraffes, wild dogs, predator and prey all meeting in the same place because they had no choice. And although these were all predators, many of them had their cubs and pups with them. The way the mothers watched out for their offspring, keeping them close, gazes darting around, searching out any danger, any risk, ready to attack at a second's notice, reminded Charlie of going to the mall with her mother. "They're all shifters," Stevie said, fascinated, her mouth slightly open. "All of them." "I've heard about places like this," Max explained. "Been invited to a few, but never went." "Why?" She shrugged. "Seems weird. Being around a bunch of people where the only thing you have in common is that you can shift into an animal." "I get the appeal," Charlie said. "Kind of like that time I went with Gramps to that family reunion. Being around people who connect with you on a very specific level can be nice. Seeing all those different shades of brown in one place was very comforting, and none of them were shifters because it was my great-grandmother's side of the family. But I still felt connected." "I go to Chinatown," Max stated flatly, "and I don't feel connected." "Aw, sweetie." Charlie put her arm around Max's shoulders. "That's because you're you." "Excuse me," a low voice said from behind them. Charlie and Max separated, and 3 very large men walked by. One of them smiled at Charlie. "Hey, beautiful." "Hi," she replied, unable to stop a surprised chuckle. Max rolled her eyes. "Oh, my God. Really? You can't let me have that? Cute guys notice me and you can't let me enjoy the moment?" "Cute guys notice you all the time." "No, short guys notice me, and guys who like big tits. Neither ever look me in the eye or call me beautiful. He did." "He's 7 feet tall. You could give him a blowjob without getting on your knees." "The point is," Stevie cut in, "that you already have a tall guy who thinks you're beautiful." Then she smiled. Weirdly. Charlie stared at her baby sister. "What are you talking about?" "You know." Stevie fluttered her eyes, which was, again, weird. "Sweetie, you don't do coquettish well, so stop that." "Come on." Max moved around them and out the doorway. "Let's check this out." "We have to meet Berg and Dag," Charlie reminded her. 5 minutes. "No. Let's just get back upstairs and—" "There's a Starbucks." "Ooh." Charlie stepped past the doorway. "Coffee?" Max pushed Charlie toward the very large Starbucks. "Go get us coffee and something with honey." "Cinnamon for me," Stevie corrected. Realizing she'd never get her sisters out of here any time soon, Charlie went into the Starbucks and got in line. Might as well get herself a cup of coffee to soothe her nerves before she went to track down Berg and Dag. She didn't want them to worry. As it was, she couldn't believe how amazing the Dunns were being, going out of their way, constantly, to help her and her sisters. How was she ever going to pay them back? How was she ever going to pay back Berg? She'd never known a guy like him. He was just so nice. And she really liked that. She liked how nice and responsible he was. Only her grandfather had ever been that responsible, but he was also grumpy. Sometimes very grumpy. Not Berg, though. He was just a really nice guy, who also happened to be really hot. Charlie rubbed her forehead. She had to stop thinking about Berg that way.
He deserved better than MacKilligan crazy in his life. He was too nice for her. What was she going to do with a nice guy but ruin his life? The line grew even as she moved forward, and it didn't take her long to realize that the woman standing behind her was sniffing her. Not enjoying that one bit, Charlie looked over her shoulder and asked, "Can I help you with something?" The woman was black, long, and lean, in a designer dress that looked perfect on her. She was beautiful, but Charlie found her bright gold eyes disconcerting, especially the way they were locked on her, and the way her nostrils flared as she leaned in to take another sniff did nothing but make Charlie want to slap the holy hell out of her. "You're bleeding," the woman finally said. "I've got my period," she lied, hoping that would end the conversation. It didn't. "I'd believe that if I didn't smell the gunpowder." "When were you shot?" Charlie glanced around, but no one seemed to be paying much attention to their conversation. "Don't worry about it," she insisted. "I got it handled." "Doubt it." The woman suddenly grabbed her upper arm, and it took everything Charlie had in her not to pull her gun and shoot the female directly in the head. "Come on." "Look, lady, I'm a doctor. We'll get it cleaned out and wrapped up in a few minutes, and you won't get the fever." "I don't get the fever." Charlie knew about the fever. She'd been hearing about it ever since she'd moved in with the pack. The fever that allowed shifters to heal themselves in about 24 hours. A fever that Charlie and her sisters didn't get. Instead, they healed in their own unique, individual ways. Ways she was not in the mood to discuss with this beautiful, lean woman who was making her insecure about her own looks. "Sure you don't." The woman pulled, and gritting her teeth, Charlie let the stranger take her out of line. What was wrong with her? If this had happened among full humans, Charlie would have just handled it, like she handled everything else, quickly, brutally, and with no remorse. But she wasn't doing that here. Maybe because a fellow shifter wouldn't be so easily put off. She couldn't scare this woman with a silent stare or a low-volume growl, and it wasn't until this moment that Charlie realized how frustrating that was. As the woman led her through the crowded lobby toward a set of elevators, Charlie glanced back in the hopes of spotting her sisters. But nope, they'd wandered off as she'd known they would. Like two exploring bear cubs wandering away from the mama bear. She expected no different from Max, but she often forgot Stevie's problems with crowds, in that she had no problems with crowds. Her panic disorder reared up when she felt trapped and alone. But Stevie didn't feel alone in crowds. In her mind, she could call for help and someone would come running to her aid. That's what allowed her to play in front of vast crowds, to lead entire orchestras, to wander around Paris in the springtime while ignoring the beauty and the danger of the city all around her. Once, Charlie and her sisters had been separated at a peace rally in England that turned violent. When the three sisters met again, Max had a bruised face and swollen knuckles. Charlie had a bruised throat and broken ribs. And Stevie was singing "Give Peace a Chance" with a bunch of hippies. Untouched, unbruised, happy as hell. But one bear in the yard and Stevie was up a tree, screaming and unable to breathe. Weird. They stepped into the elevator and went down a few floors. The woman still had a grip on Charlie's arm while she held her phone in her free hand and read emails. "Look," Charlie tried. "I appreciate—" "Nope." "Nope what?" "Just nope," the woman said, not even looking up from her phone. "Whatever bullshit you're about to tell me, nope." The doors opened and they were moving again. Only this time, as they walked, people greeted the woman. "Hey, Doc. Looking good, Doc. Marry me. I'll be by around 2, Doc. My leg is acting up again." The woman nodded and smiled as shifters of varying sizes greeted her, but she never stopped and she never eased her hold on Charlie's arm. Well, at least she was a doctor, of some kind. The woman dragged Charlie into a very active medical facility, filled to the brim with shifters of varying sizes. "Hey, Doc," the receptionist said. "Your 1 o'clock is here. Ask them to wait, would you, Sal? I've got an emergency." "Yeah, but—" The doctor didn't wait for the receptionist to finish.
She simply took Charlie into a room and over to an exam table. She briefly left and returned a minute or two later wearing a lab coat with a stethoscope in the pocket and a blank chart. A nurse followed in behind her. "Okay, hun," the doc said, opening up the chart and beginning to fill it out. "Let's get that stuff off and see what we're dealing with. I really can't afford health care, at least not health care here, so I can just move from that spot and I'll have Nurse Konami put you in a headlock that will make your eyes bleed." Charlie glanced over at the nurse. She wasn't a particularly tall or brawny woman, nothing too threatening. The doctor said, still not looking at her. "Nurse Konami may be full human, but she is married to an Asian black bear, and she deals with football and hockey players all day, every day. Men and women 2 to 3 times your size are terrified of her, and for good reason. So if I were you, I'd take off your clothes, put on a gown, and shut up." Charlie knew she could still fight her way out of here. If nothing else, she was armed. But Berg had brought her here. He must have some connection to the place, and she wasn't about to embarrass him. So as much as she didn't want to, she'd suck it up for the very nice bear who'd been helping her and her sisters. She pulled off her light jacket, t-shirt, and bra and sat there, refusing to put on the robe, partly because she hated those things, but also because she'd been busy putting her gun under her jacket so the 2 females wouldn't see it. "By the way, my name is Dr. Davis, and let's get a look at—" She'd finally looked up from her paperwork and stopped when she saw Charlie sitting there, topless. "So you're not shy," she guessed. "Nope. Excellent." She walked over and carefully pulled off the gauze that Charlie had stuffed in and around the wounds on her back. "Huh," she heard the doctor say, and Charlie looked at her over her shoulder. The doctor's expression changed a bit, her brow pulling down in concern and confusion. She wanted to step away, and Charlie didn't blame her. "You really don't have to do anything," Charlie explained while the doctor stared, or gawked. "It'll work itself out." "My dear girl, this is not going to work itself out." "Actually, it will. You just have to wait a little bit. It's in the final stages." "The final stages before your death?" That made Charlie chuckle. As if my life could ever be that simple. She looked around the room. "Got a magazine I can look at while we're waiting?" Max put a baseball cap on Stevie's head and stepped back. "Perfect!" Not really. The hat was way too big. It was apparently bear-sized and covered half of Stevie's face. Embroidered on the hat was "The Carnivores," which seemed really bold to Max. Just putting out there that they were all meat-eating predators and everything. It was true that Max had had more interaction with shifters outside the pack than Charlie or Stevie, but those shifters were Dutch and his family and their few friends. Wolverines. Like the honey badgers, the Wolverines weren't involved with the shifter nation, as they called it. They preferred to be around full humans or, even better, no one. They could be quite introverted. Not unpleasant, rarely rude, but introverted. So seeing all these shifters in one place, hanging out, pretty much getting along was unusual. Interesting, though. "I can't see," Stevie complained. "But you look adorable." She took a picture with her phone and texted it to Charlie seconds before Stevie slapped the hat off her head. Laughing, Max showed the picture to Stevie. "Adorable!" "Do you ever get tired of mocking me?" "No." "I'm going to look for a bookstore." "Why?" Stevie patted her shoulder. "You make me sad. Do me a favor and keep an eye out for Charlie. If we go missing, she will flip out on us." I know. Max went through the sports store and found a few shirts and caps she wanted to buy. But it had been a while, and she thought it was best to go track down Charlie before Charlie had to track down her and Stevie. Their big sister's anxiety went through the roof when she couldn't find them, and Max didn't want to be responsible for the ulcer she was sure Charlie was going to get if she didn't relax a little. Max walked back to where she'd last seen her sister. She stood outside the Starbucks and, going up on her toes, she tried to look over the heads inside the open cafe. So many tall people. Frowning when she didn't see her sister, Max decided to go inside for a closer look. But as she began to move, she heard a screeched, "Livy!" and then something landed on her back. Without thought, only instinct trained into her since the death of her adopted mother, Max reached behind her, grabbed hold of whatever had her, lifted up and over, and slammed the person onto the floor. She rammed her foot against a chest to pin her prey to the ground and pulled out the blade holstered at the back of her jeans. She raised the blade over her head, about to drop onto the prey beneath her to keep it pinned in place. But a hand grabbed her wrist, halting the blade mid-attack and yanking her back and away. The grip on her wrist was firm, so firm Max knew she couldn't break it. So she turned her body, dislocating her shoulder. She ignored the pain and unleashed the claws on her free hand, burying them deep into someone's side. She heard a grunt of pain and finally looked up. And holy shit. Up, until she was gazing into bright blue eyes surrounded by white hair. Max hissed, unleashing her fangs. In return, the man unleashed his own, and when his two eye teeth continued to grow until they reached past his square jaw like a pair of tusks, Max decided she was out. Fuck that shifter shit with their honorable fang-to-fang, claw-to-claw code that Dutch had always told her about. Max yanked out her claws, causing blood to arc out of the male's side and splatter several onlookers. She spun again, the pain in her shoulder very close to making her pass out. But she clenched her jaw, and when she faced the man again, she quickly sized him up before kicking him mid-chest. Shocked by the power of the blow, he finally released her, sending Max reeling. She hit the ground, rolled backward, and stood. By then she had blades in both hands. Her wounded shoulder couldn't move much, but she could still have his eyes out and his throat cut before the pain got so bad she'd wish that someone would just kill her already. She cracked her neck and started forward, but two adorable bookend bears slid to a stop in front of her, both with their big arms out, matching eyes wide in panic. "No, Max," Berg said. "Don't do it." Max narrowed her eyes, not because she was plotting something, but because her shoulder was killing her. But the two males misinterpreted. "You can't do this," Berg begged. "Please, just walk away."
"Max?"
Max looked away from the two bears and saw her cousin standing a few feet away.
"What the fuck are you doing?"
Livy walked closer, shoving the two bears out of the way.
"Starting shit again?"
She growled before yelling,
"Again?"
"It wasn't me! It was—" Max started to point at the man who was behind the bears, bleeding from his side. He'd done the damage to her shoulder, but he hadn't actually started anything. Max looked over the crowd, finally pointing at a black woman in roller skates. "It was her!" Livy turned and saw her cousin's entire body go tense.
"What did she do?"
"She hugged me from behind." Livy rested her hands on her hips.
"I thought we talked about that sort of thing, Blaine."
"Okay, this looks bad," the woman called Blaine said, skating forward, focused on Livy. "But I thought it was you." Max stepped up beside her cousin. "Is that your excuse? That we all look alike?"
"What?"
Blaine's eyes widened in horror.
"No, of course not."
"Really, Blaine?" Livy asked.
"Because it sounds like you're saying we all look alike."
Of course, they were cousins, and Blaine hadn't actually seen Max from the front. She was just going on body size and the short hair. But that didn't matter, because this chick was just too easy to fuck with. Hell, Max could do this all day.
"Because we're Asian?"
Max asked.
"Of course not. I mean, my husband—"
"What?" Max pushed. "You about to tell me that some of your best friends are Asian?"
"Actually, my best friend is... Look, I'm just saying that,
Her brown eyes narrowed.
You two are fucking with me, aren't you?"
Max started laughing. She couldn't help it. Who was this little weirdo? The big guy who'd gotten between Max's blade and Blaine's sternum stepped up beside Blaine and glowered down at Max.
"You tell him, honey,"
Blaine said.
"My husband."
Max knew she was looking at a fellow half-Asian, so she was kind of expecting a talking to, as Charlie liked to call her lectures. To be honest, looking at the size of the guy and seeing the blood dripping onto the floor from the side she'd ripped open with her claws, she'd gladly welcome a talking to rather than a beating on. Still glowering, Blaine's husband demanded, "Do you skate?"
"Yeah,"
Blaine agreed.
"Do you—"
She turned to her husband.
"Does she skate?"
"We need a new enforcer, and she's mean."
Max grinned.
"I am mean."
"I think she's a serial killer,"
Livy added, for some reason.
"Look at that smile,"
she said flatly, pointing at Max.
"That sick, disturbing smile."
Max tilted her head to the side and tapped Livy on the elbow.
"Thanks so much, cousin,"
she said with as much sweetness as she could possibly manage. Frowning, Livy stepped away from her.
"See what I mean?"
"She was going to kill me,"
Blaine accurately pointed out to her husband.
"She wouldn't be the first."
"Where's your sister?" Berg asked Max.
"Which one?"
"Don't play word games." "Excuse me, Britta,"
Blaine's husband interrupted, glaring at Berg.
"I'm trying to have a conversation."
Berg's eyes briefly closed, and he gave a short shake of his head while Dag smiled a little and looked away.
"I am not Britta, you Cro-Magnon. I'm Berg. That's Dag." "Is there really a difference?" "Yes," Berg insisted. "Yes, there is."
The man shrugged.
"I don't see it."
Berg's jaw tightened in frustration, and Max wondered how many times he'd had this conversation with the tusked guy. Clearly more than once.
"Let's get your sisters and go,"
Berg finally said, focusing on Max. Max shrugged. "I have no idea where they are. Go find them."
"Max." "Yeah,"
Blaine's husband said.
"Go find them."
He reached out and grabbed Max's wrist.
"She'll be at the training rink."
"I can't believe this,"
Blaine nearly shouted.
"She tried to kill me, and now you're going to test her out to be your enforcer?"
Her big brown eyes welled with tears.
"I am the mother of your children."
He faced her, but still didn't release Max.
"I don't understand the connection."
"I should be more important to you than hockey."
He looked off, blew out a breath.
"You should."
Max bit the inside of her cheek to stop from laughing. Blaine stomped one skate-covered foot before skating off, a group of derby girls following her. The giant glowered down at Max, but now she saw a hint of a smile around his eyes and at the corners of his mouth.
"I'm going to pay for that later."
Berg watched Max follow Bo the Marauder Novikov.
"Does he really not know that we aren't Britta?"
Dag asked. Again.
"If it doesn't involve hockey or that one woman who tolerates him, I don't think he notices anything."
Livy tapped Berg's arm.
"So what has my cousin and her sisters gotten you two involved in? Are you in danger? Did you lose any money? Are you being followed by foreign interests?"
Berg frowned.
"What are you talking about?" "Look, as someone I don't necessarily want wiped from the face of the planet." "Aw, thanks, Liv."
Berg stared at his brother.
"What's wrong with you?"
"Be careful that you don't get too involved with the MacKilligan sisters."
"Why?"
"Well, according to my mother and aunts, they're cursed."
"Cursed,"
Berg repeated.
"Uh-huh."
"By ghosts." Scratching his forehead, Berg gave himself a brief moment before asking Livy,
"You believe they're cursed by ghosts?"
"No, I don't believe in ghosts."
"So you just think they're cursed in general?"
"Yeah, I definitely think they're cursed. It's their father's fault, though. I think he pissed off a witch or something." You don't believe in ghosts, but you believe in witches?
Witches exist.
Berg nodded. Okay, I'm walking away now. He did, and Dag followed behind him.
If I were you, Livy called out, I'd find the little sister before you go looking for the big one. If you don't have the little one, the big one is going to flip the fuck out.
Berg stopped walking and let out a sigh. Livy's right, isn't she? Dag asked. Yeah, but Stevie could be anywhere here. Well, let's try to think like her. Dag folded his arms over his chest and said in all seriousness, So where would a former child prodigy and genius with an extreme panic disorder who is being hunted by all sorts of people go when in a shifter-filled sports center? Berg began scratching his forehead again, first with one hand, then the other, until he finally just buried his face in both hands and let out a very large, very pained sigh. There was a food court, and a shockingly large and well-stocked bookstore. She even found an entire store devoted just to honey. Honey. She'd gone in there, despite the large grizzly sow behind the counter who wouldn't stop glowering at her. She'd started to panic a little, but she swallowed it and put in a large order to be sent to the house for her sisters. She was actually not a fan of honey, too sweet for her taste. But once the order was in, the sow went from glowering to glowing. Suddenly, she was more than happy to help Stevie, even without knowing what the hell Stevie was. She kept sniffing. At one point, when Stevie was looking at a large display of chocolate-covered honeycombs — Max loved honeycombs — she felt the sow standing right behind her, and Stevie was almost positive that she sniffed the back of her neck. Thankfully, her meds were working well, and Stevie, after years of group and individual therapy, was able to deep breathe her way through the oncoming panic until the sow moved away from her. After leaving that store, Stevie bought a large order of very crispy French fries, a large bottle of water, and asked for extra ketchup. Then she found a bench in the middle of a high-traffic area where she could comfortably people-watch. Everyone was going somewhere or coming from somewhere and didn't notice her at all. She loved it. Watching the movement of people, hearing their voices rise and fall, listening to the noises coming from the nearby food court made her think of music, made her think of what she could do with these sounds. She could easily see trained dancers moving to what was playing in her head. She smiled a little. It had been years since she'd had the time, energy, and emotional fortitude to allow herself to think about her own music, to let her easily stressed-out mind wander down those roads of emotion and art. To this day, she still got emails from fans. Her work was still discussed in music schools and prestigious university music programs. Some classical orchestras still attempted to play her beloved but most complicated symphonies to sold-out audiences. At one time, she had been the one conducting those orchestras, even though she'd only been about 7 and had to have a specially made podium in order to see and be seen by the orchestra and audience. She was 10 when she'd walked away from all of it. She'd hit a creative and emotional wall that had her, literally, hanging from the ceiling by her newly formed claws, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to do anything but cry and hyperventilate until they started her on medication. Medication, though, hadn't been an easy fix for Stevie. The first reason was because she was a shifter. Shifters had very amped-up internal systems that allowed them to heal quickly without medication, which was great for physical ailments, but a real problem when one had mental issues. Then add in that Stevie was also half honey badger. Medications and poisons were easily absorbed and then pissed out by honey badger shifters. 16-year-old Max had once tried vodka infused with the venom of the black mamba snake. She was in a coma for an entire day before she snapped awake, hungry and smiling. Smiling until a livid Charlie punched Max in the face, breaking their sister's nose and cheekbone as she screamed, "Never do anything that goddamn stupid again!" And even though Stevie and Charlie were only half badger, With what Charlie insisted on calling our dad's fucked-up genes, they still had to manage their medications differently from nearly everyone else in the world. So it took years before Stevie and her team of psychiatrists and therapists and German physicians found the right combination of talk therapy and meds. In that time, she'd not only walked away from her brilliant music career, she'd run, screaming. Most of the prodigies Stevie had known when she was growing up had parents who would have never let them quit what had been a substantial worldwide career, especially considering the money she'd brought in. But Stevie's mother had abandoned her to Charlie's mom for reasons still unknown to her. When Charlie's mom had been killed and the three of them had gone to live with the pack in Wisconsin, the pack left decisions about Max and Stevie up to Charlie's grandfather and, eventually, Charlie. When Stevie said she didn't want to write, play, or even think about music anymore, Charlie had only asked, "Then what are you going to do? Because you'll need to do something, and we both know it." As always, Charlie had been right. If Stevie didn't occupy her mind, things would get bad for everyone. So, Stevie focused on physics and math. She liked equations and science, and behind it all, she'd always found a certain level of music, of art. It turned out she'd been a prodigy in that, too, which meant all her scholastic financial needs were met by other people. Important, since financially her father had eventually ruined what was left of her music career. Universities, labs, and some rich people liked being a benefactor to a child who tested out of high school by the time she was 11. The thing was, life wasn't exactly great now. They were being hunted. So what made Stevie feel comfortable bringing music back into her life? Why did she feel calmer than she had in a long while? It could have been shifting to her animal form earlier in the day. She didn't do that often, which wasn't surprising. She kind of terrified everyone when she became a giant, tiger-striped honey badger, bigger than even the polar bears and grizzlies. Yet Stevie was starting to think it was being around her sisters that was doing her the most good. Yeah, Charlie's anxiety and obsessive baking could be trying, and Max never stopped fucking with Stevie, no matter how many times Stevie punched her in the throat. But at the end of the day, knowing they were there for her... "Hello!" Stevie heard the voice. Someone was talking to her. Crunching on a French fry, she looked up. The handsome man appeared vaguely familiar, but... "Still don't remember me, huh?" he guessed with a smile. "Should I?" "We saw each other at Livy Kowalski's apartment. You were hanging from the ceiling before passing out from lithium. I'm Cooper." Stevie picked up another fry, put it in her mouth, chewed, and stared. Still nothing? When she continued to silently stare and eat, he said, "Maybe you remember my sister." But Stevie doubted it. He turned, called out, "Charisse, come here!" A pretty young woman walked over, and Stevie sized her up instantly. This woman did not like being out in public. She did not like being around crowds. Stevie was guessing that if she had even one more minor trauma, she'd end up going full agoraphobic if her family didn't keep an eye on her. But other than that unsolicited psychological diagnosis, nope, Stevie had no idea who this woman was either.
"Wow, Stevie, look at you," Charisse said. "You look amazing." "Thanks. You..."
"She doesn't remember you, or me, or anyone."
"It's nothing personal."
"Really?" the male called Cooper said. "Because it feels personal."
"I have a lot of knowledge in my head. If something isn't important, I just get rid of it." "How is that not personal?" Charisse softly asked. "I get rid of a lot of people in my head. I don't do it to be vicious, or because I hate you. You're just not important to me. It's like clearing off a hard drive. All those songs you never listened to or out-of-focus pictures that are useless, you just wipe it off the drive. I mean, why would you keep that stuff?"
Again, not seeing how this isn't personal.
"Well, to be blunt,"
the male raised a brow, You mean you weren't being blunt before?
My brain is important. I refuse to fill it up with meaningless crap. I really don't know what else to... Oh, my God. Stevie put her fries aside and stood. Kyle? She asked the tall young man walking toward their small group, smiling at her. Oh, my God. Kyle! Stevie ran into the open arms of Kyle Jean-Louis Parker, hugging him tightly. Behind her she heard, Him, you remember? Of course I remember Kyle, she said, keeping one arm around his waist while Kyle's arm curled around her shoulder. He's Kyle. Kyle nodded. Exactly. But you do remember these guys, Stevie. He pointed at Cooper. Mr. Needy, Charisse, pathologically shy. He gestured to the young woman walking up behind them. Genetic freak. Oh, of course, your siblings. Seriously? Cooper demanded. I'm leaving, Charisse quietly announced, before doing just that. And fuck you, from the sister that Stevie now remembered was a prima ballerina in an important ballet company, somewhere in America. See, Kyle pointed out, the genetic freak is sad because her brain can only do so much. That's it, I'm out. The genetic freak walked away, her middle finger held high in the air. Wait, Cooper called out. Tony is coming to meet us here with... Okay, well, she's gone. That restrictive diet sure does make her cranky, Kyle observed. Why do you do this? His brother asked. You'll have to be much more specific. But before his brother could bother, he turned to Stevie. So what are you doing in New York? Running for my life. Oh, I'm sorry. Your father again? Of course. Peruvian drug lords? Who knows? My sisters are here, though. Ooh, the infamous Charlie and Max. I've been dying to meet them for years. Well, now you can. I told them all about you. So what are you doing in the city? He was kicked out of another art school. I was not kicked out, Kyle argued. I was asked to leave because some people can't handle criticism, or the suggestion that they might have a borderline personality disorder that should get treated. Borderline or bipolar? Stevie asked. People often get those two confused. Definitely borderline. She came at me with a knife, nearly took my eye out. That actually could have been anybody, with or without a disorder, Cooper muttered. Kyle glanced at his brother before admitting to Stevie, He's so jealous of me, he doesn't know what to do with himself. Jealous? Cooper asked. Of you? You wish you had as much talent as me and my dear sweet Stevie. I do have as much talent as your dear sweet Stevie, and God knows I'm better than you. See, Kyle said to Stevie, how he lives in his sad fantasy world. Although Stevie doesn't remember it, and it was at different times, we were both trained by the same maestro. We even played together at one point. But did you ever conduct the St. Petersburg Orchestra in a symphony you wrote when you were 9? Didn't think so, Kyle said before his brother could reply. Hey, Coop. Cooper turned and waved at a woman walking toward them with a large male behind her. As soon as Stevie saw him, she recognized that mane of hair. Stevie immediately moved behind Kyle, using his tall frame to block her. It had been so long ago, and she'd been so young. Too young. Not even 17. He'd come into her life trying to get her back into music, trying to drag her back to a world she'd willingly left. But she'd listened to his pitch because he was a cat shifter, and Stevie had stupidly thought he was like her, would understand her. She'd assumed that it had all been about money for him, and to a point it was. But that day he'd backed her into a corner in her lab, saying things to her that made her uncomfortable, but making her feel like she couldn't leave, that she had to listen, that she somehow owed him something. Of course, those had been the days when her sisters had kept a much closer eye on her. They couldn't afford to go to college themselves, but they liked hanging out at her campus. So when her sisters had walked into Stevie's lab, things had spiraled out of control quickly. After that, there were cops and lawsuits and more threats, until it all disappeared. Stevie still didn't know how or why. She'd just been grateful. But seeing him again, after all these years, all these changes in her life, Stevie turned her back and prayed neither of her sisters suddenly appeared. Coop saw Stevie move away as soon as Tony walked up with that lion male she was considering as an agent for Charisse and Oriana. He apparently specialized in representing artists and was known for making them very profitable deals. But the way Stevie reacted to the sight of the man... Kyle, who rarely cared about anyone but himself, moved in front of her, helping to block her from the cat's sight. Stevie was older than Kyle by a few years, but Kyle always got along better with adults than kids his own age. He didn't know how to talk to them. He did, however, know how to emotionally torture them, which was another reason he didn't spend a lot of time with kids his own age. Their parents wouldn't allow it. Coop thought back and remembered some news many years ago about the possibility that Stevie MacKilligan would be re-entering the music business. She'd apparently found an agent who'd convinced her that the world was at a loss without her music and passion. Then, just as suddenly as the rumor started, it stopped. There was no comeback. She stayed with science and moved through that difficult profession like a house on fire. But Coop also remembered reading a small story in a German paper about the Sisters of Maestro Stevie MacKilligan being investigated by American authorities for a brutal assault. Since Coop hadn't really known Stevie's siblings, he hadn't paid much attention. He had his own psychotic siblings to worry about. He was just grateful none had ended up in the crime section of the paper. Yet. Now Coop studied the man with Tony, another arrogant lion wearing a tailored suit, necessary for males that size, who couldn't seem to control his hair.
"Where are Charisse and Oriana?" Tony asked. "I told them to meet us here."
"Well, Kyle..."
"Okay, enough said."
Tony had been more on edge since Kyle had come back to the States. Add in the attack on Coop's hotel room, and his sister was, to put it mildly, less patient than usual.
"Any idea where they went?"
"I don't know about Charisse, but Oriana likes to watch the hockey players, and your mate's brother invited her to check out practice." Tony's eyes narrowed.
"Is she dating one of those idiots?"
"She hasn't told me anything." "Kyle?" "I don't care." Coop sighed. "And Kyle doesn't care."
"We'll walk over to the practice rink. See if you can track down Charisse, please."
"If she hasn't already gone home. Why don't you just call Oriana or text her?" Tony moved past Coop, lovingly bumping her shoulder against his as she went by, letting him know her terseness had nothing to do with him, a gesture he appreciated at the moment.
"Apparently," she explained as she moved, the lion walking beside her, "she's blocked me on her phone. The little cow."
Coop smiled and waited for the pair to turn the corner before he walked past Kyle and stood in front of Stevie. She wouldn't look at him. The confident artist and scientist who couldn't be bothered to remember Coop's name suddenly appeared as painfully shy as Charisse. It was clear she didn't want to talk about any of this, but he still had to know. He decided to go with the direct but non-invasive approach. "If you had a little sister," he asked Stevie, "would you hire him?" Kyle put his arm around Stevie's shoulders, a form of protection he didn't even bother to show his own sisters.
"If I had a little sister," Stevie said, her arms wrapped around her waist, "I'd keep her as far away from that fucker as humanly possible."
She leaned against Kyle and added,
"And he'd better pray that my sisters don't spot him."
Jai Davis watched, mesmerized, as the bullets that had been pumped into the hybrid female sitting on her examination table began to pop out of the wound on her shoulder. According to Charlie MacKilligan, this was what her body did. The wound began to heal from the inside, without stitches, without surgery.
At first, infected fluid poured from the wound while Charlie sat and read a 3-year-old Vogue. So much fluid that Jai was surprised the girl didn't have a brutal, possibly fatal fever. Then some blood. At that point, Charlie said, "Almost done." It was clear the hybrid was used to this. She didn't even have to look at the wound to know what stage it was in. She was still reading a magazine. Jai and Ellen waited, and 30 minutes later, bullets. That is fascinating. Is it? Charlie asked. Not for you, I'm assuming. How often has this happened? A few times over the years. You've been shot a few times? Not just shot. There were a couple of knife fights, bar fights, fight with a pit bull once, but she started it. Sure she did. Pieces of the third bullet slid out, and once out, the skin began to knit shut on its own. Amazing. Jai straightened up and walked around until she stood in front of Charlie. Really amazing. When you shift, do you heal faster? I don't shift. Jai was surprised. She'd heard about a few shifters who refused to shift. Religious zealots from every branch who thought being a shifter was evil. Was this female one of those? Is that a moral choice? Charlie looked at Jai, frowning. Huh? Is it a moral choice that you don't shift? Why would that be a moral choice? There's nothing morally wrong with shifting. She leaned away slightly. Are you one of those weird, crazy religious people? No, Jai chuckled. I'm actually a Buddhist. But you said you don't shift. Oh, well, let me rephrase. I can't shift. Jai folded her arms over her chest. You can't? Nope. Are you sure? Positive. My sister started shifting very early, but me? I just didn't. And my grandfather's entire pack worked with me for years after I hit puberty. But other than claws and fangs, she shrugged, I don't shift. Are you okay with that? Well, she thought a moment. I heal really well, have bones like iron, and my inability to shift is just more proof that my father can't get anything right. So I'm all good. Jai laughed. She liked Charlie. She was unusual, although she'd never met a shifter who couldn't shift. She'd met a few who didn't know they were shifters, who'd lived their lives as full human and, when puberty hit, hadn't gone through that quintessential moment of shifting back and forth to human. It was rare, but it did happen. But that wasn't Charlie's story at all. She had to be the strangest hybrid Jai had ever met, and she'd met quite a few. There was a large and still growing group of hybrids in the tri-state area, yet Charlie now stood out among them, and apart from them. At least Charlie had a sense of humor about it. Nothing would be worse than if she was a whiny mess about herself. Jai hated people like that. The always victim, she liked to call them. Jai's cell phone vibrated in her coat, and she took a quick glance. Slipping it back into her pocket, she moved forward and took another look at Charlie's wound. The scar was ugly, but Jai couldn't see any lingering evidence of infection or internal damage. Get dressed, she ordered, and I'll be right back. Jai went down the hallway toward the large glass windows that separated the exam rooms from the waiting room. She saw her best friend standing among all the chairs. Sadly, though, Sella Malone was not by herself. She had that hillbilly hound dog with her. Jai opened the thick glass door and went into the waiting room. Hey, what's up? Sella jerked her head toward the exam rooms. Do you have Charlie MacKilligan in there? It was true. Jai loved her best friend. She wasn't just a best friend. She was family. Their daughters, conceived before either was even 17, were like close cousins. But as much as Jai loved Marcella Malone, she didn't lie to herself about Marcella Malone. You know I can't tell you that, Jai replied, doctor-patient privilege. For shifters? For everyone, dumbass. You know that. Look, Sella went on. I can't get into detail. I don't want to hear it. But we really need to... Don't want to hear it. Talk to the kid. Go away, Sella. Jai heard the glass door close, and she turned to see that some male had slipped past her into the exam room hallway. "Sella, what have you done? Trust me. Just give him 5 minutes." Jai faced her friend, eyes wide. She was horrified. She knew what her friend did for a living, had heard what her hound dog companion was known for, knew the kind of people Sella hung around when she wasn't hanging around Jai and the Malone family. Jai turned to run back into the exam room to help her patient, but Sella grabbed her arm, held her in place. 5 minutes, she said, calmly and coldly. Just the way Sella killed. Chapter 13. The helpful, full-human nurse had given Charlie a clean T-shirt to wear, and as she pulled it down, it was so big it reached her knees, she saw what was written on the front. "The Carnivores," she read. Subtle. "It's the local pro hockey team," the nurse said with a smile, busy wiping away the remnants of Charlie's healing process. She had to admit she was glad she didn't have to clean it up herself. What her body went through to heal was disgusting, but she was still grateful for it. The nurse dumped unclean things in a special trash can, stripped off her latex gloves, and dumped those, too. "I'll be back in a moment." "Okay." The nurse left, and Charlie looked down at her jeans to make sure they didn't have any gross stuff on them. They didn't, so she felt comfortable heading out into the world dressed in a weird black, silver, and white T-shirt with carnivore written on it in giant letters. It wasn't like the shirt was lying. Reaching down, Charlie grabbed her burgundy Converse sneakers and placed them on the exam table. She was going for one when the door to the room opened, and she lifted her head, expecting to see the nurse or the doctor, but it was neither. Her frown grew deep, though, when she saw who was standing there. "Dutch?" she asked, extremely surprised to see him. "What's wrong?" Her anxiety ramped up. "They didn't find the car, did they?" No, that's all done. I just need to talk to you, really quick." "About what?" He looked off, and Charlie let out a sigh. "What did Max do?" "What? Oh, nothing. She didn't do anything." "Then what did you do?" "Well, look," she said, pulling on one of her sneakers. "I'll pay for Max's fuck-ups, but I'm not paying for yours. You've got family. Ask them for money." "I'm not asking you for money." "Then what?" He paused another moment before he just sort of spilled everything. "The people who came by your house earlier, they weren't there to hurt you, Charlie. They wanted to talk to you. Initially, they just wanted to talk to Max. But after seeing you, Stevie, and Max in, from what I understand, rare form up in the Bronx, they want to talk to all of you about a job." The second shoe forgotten, Charlie stood up straight, her mind churning, trying to make sense of what Dutch was telling her. "You," she said, pointing her finger. "You sent those people to us. The people I saw on the roof. The ones watching us. They wanted to see Max in action, and, well, it just so happened Max was in action. But so were you and Stevie. I mean, it really worked out well." "Did it?" "Yeah, they're really interested in you guys, and I have to tell you, it's an awesome job, Charlie. Excellent money, benefits, protection. I've been wanting to get Max hooked up with them for a while now, but..." He shrugged. "I knew you wouldn't be too happy about it." "Really? Did you really know I wouldn't be too happy?" "Look, Charlie, I know you haven't been crazy about me all these years. I'm not sure why. I'm amazing. But I think even you know that I wouldn't do anything to hurt Max or Stevie. I love you guys." Charlie scratched the side of her mouth. She had a little itch there. But then her fingers started to bother her, and she curled one hand into a fist, placed the palm of the other over it, and cracked her knuckles. She did the same to the other hand. "Now, Charlie," Dutch tried to soothe, "let's be calm about this. You know I adore you, but I'm not going to just let you flip out on me either. You understand what I'm telling you?" "Yeah," she said calmly. I understand." Berg, after sending Dag off in the opposite direction, had continued his search for either of the two MacKilligan sisters. He knew where Max was, so he was intensely focused on finding Charlie or Stevie, preferably both. When he walked into the health center, where all the athletes went to get their torn artery repair, he wasn't sure why he'd come. Maybe because it seemed logical Stevie might be here. She seemed remarkably comfortable with the medical profession. But when he took a quick look around and his gaze locked with the yellow eyes of a Smith Pack female, he realized that he was probably right about finding at least one of the MacKilligan sisters here. He also realized that they were in real trouble. Berg smiled and fought the natural urge to let his grizzly hump grow. It added strength to his attacks, but he had to be careful when it came to members of the Smith Pack. They weren't like other wolves. He slid his hand behind him, wrapping his fingers around the butt of his gun. "Berg!" Sella Malone cheered. "I'm so glad you're here." "Hey, Sella." He knew Sella Malone pretty well, and he liked her, but he never forgot who and what she was. "So what's going on?" "Pull that weapon out, son," the she-wolf drawled, no longer looking at him, "and it'll be the last thing you ever do." Sella frowned in confusion, her gaze darting back and forth between him and her Smith Pack associate. "Wait," Sella said, walking away from Dr. Davis and over to him. She sniffed him. "It was you at their house. Hold on. Do you think we want to hurt the MacKilligan sisters?" Berg let his silence answer her question. "Oh, God, no. No! That's not what's happening." "Uh-huh. You don't believe me?" "I don't believe you," Dr. Davis said from across the room. "Jai, is this you helping?" Sella asked with false sweetness. Dr. Davis didn't reply, so Sella refocused on him. "I can see how you might think we were, but we're not. That's the farthest thing from our minds. Just a conversation, that's all we want. So if you could just—" A crash from the exam rooms cut off Sella's next lies, and Berg moved past all the women, heading right to the glass door. He just opened it when the glass and blinds of one of the exam rooms exploded out, nurses, orderlies, and other doctors making a panicked run for it, and an annoying weasel landed hard on the hallway floor. A few seconds later, Charlie followed Dutch out, glaring down at him. "You're not being reasonable," Dutch was saying, just as Charlie reached down, wrapped her hand around Dutch's throat, and lifted the guy off the floor. With one hand. Berg had to be honest. He hadn't realized how strong Charlie was, and to be completely forthright, he found it kind of a huge turn-on. Shaking his head, Berg tried to get control of himself and the situation. "Charlie, let him go." "He's a lying sack of shit," she growled out between clenched teeth, "and I'm gonna twist this motherfucker into a pretzel." "Good Lord," the she-wolf sighed, pushing past Berg and sauntering into the hallway. Sella came in behind her. Berg tried to stop Sella, but she just pulled her arm away and kept going. "Darlin'," the wolf said, standing beside Charlie and Dutch, "you need to put that boy down now. You don't want me to get nasty." Charlie didn't even look at the wolf. She acted like she didn't notice her. How could she not notice her? Had her packmates not warned her about the Smith Pack? He thought every shifter, everywhere, knew about the Smith Pack, and especially about Deanne Smith. Charlie's fingers tightened on Dutch's throat, and the weasel began to turn a dangerous shade of blue. Without Berg even really seeing it, Deanne Smith had pulled a blade from somewhere and was swinging it toward Charlie's arm, probably just to cut her, probably just to snap her out of her homicidal rage. But still without looking away from Dutch, with her free hand, Charlie caught Deanne's wrist in mid-swipe and held it there. Slowly, Charlie moved her gaze from the weasel to the wolf. Her eyes changed color behind her glasses. Deanne didn't seem to like that, and she unleashed her fangs while she tried to pull her arm away. Charlie's lips pulled back over her teeth, and slowly rows and rows of large fangs descended from her gums. They weren't exactly wolf fangs, but they weren't all honey badger either. They were more like a bizarre combination of the two, and they were terrifying. Then her jaw opened, and it continued to open, yellow eyes bright as she issued a growl hiss that had Sella's fangs dropping. Charlie had her back to the she-tiger, which was just the way Sella liked it. She jumped toward Charlie with nothing blocking her, nothing there to stop her, claws out and extended. In that split second, Charlie turned to the right, flinging Deanne into a shocked Sella, so that the two she-predators collided, slamming into the wall and falling to the floor. He heard Jai gasp behind him, sensed the mountain lion starting to shift in order to help her friend. "No," he said to her, because that could only end badly, especially when he saw that Charlie still had her grip on Dutch. "You lied to me," Charlie said, shoving Dutch against the wall, his feet not even touching the floor. "You've betrayed me and my sisters, and you know how I feel about traitors." Deanne managed to get to her feet, the blade still in her hand. She went for Charlie again. Now Charlie dropped her prey, turned, and caught Deanne's entire arm. She slammed the wolf into the wall, ramming her elbow into her throat, pinning her there. She brought her knee up and hammered it into Deanne's lower abdomen. Shaking her head, Sella scrambled to her feet and again attacked Charlie from behind. With one elbow in Deanne's throat, Charlie abruptly turned at the waist, bringing her other elbow back and directly into Sella's face, shattering her nose. Blood sprayed. Charlie slapped the flat of her hand against Sella's chest and shoved her, sending the she-cat flying back across the hall. Charlie brought her free hand toward Deanne's arm while tugging the arm forward. The two collided, and Berg cringed when he heard bone break. Deanne howled from the pain, and she dropped her blade. "Charlie!" Berg called out when he was afraid she was about to focus on breaking Deanne's neck, a move that would have the entire Smith pack hunting the MacKilligan sisters down. Nothing would save them. Nothing. Charlie froze but didn't look at him. He scrambled for something to get her attention. Not only to get it, but to keep it. It took him less than 5 seconds. "I can't find Stevie. Max doesn't know where she is." She looked at him, and her yellow eyes returned to brown. She released her grip on Deanne's shattered arm and stepped away. But Deanne, being a Smith, didn't drop to the ground. She didn't ask for help. She simply panted in pain and glowered at Charlie. Charlie briefly paused to backhand Deanne Smith, sending the she-wolf flipping down the hall. She took a few more steps, then stopped again, this time next to the weasel. She kicked him 5 times. After that, Charlie headed toward Berg. But abruptly, she stopped again, raised a finger. "Charlie, no." But she'd already run back into the exam room she'd just come out of. A few seconds later, she returned holding a sneaker. He hadn't realized until now that the whole time she'd been in the fight, she'd only been wearing one shoe. She stopped by his side, lifted her leg, and tugged the sneaker on. "Come on," she said when she was done. "I think I know where to find her." Britta skated out onto the ice with her practice gear on. She'd been on the carnivore practice team for 2 years now. She'd been offered a second-string position, but with her schedule being so random, she couldn't commit to being available when the team needed her. And if she couldn't do it right, she didn't want to bother. Besides, getting offered second string was a little insulting, but she expected no less from the bitchy head coach she-cat they had running the team. Britta was halfway across the ice when she abruptly stopped and looked to her left. "Huh?" She changed direction and skated over to the woman outfitted in hockey gear. "Max?" she said when she came to a stop. "What are you doing here?" The badger shrugged. "No idea." "Why are you wearing hockey gear?" "No idea." "Do you even know how to skate?" "Well, I spent a few years in Wisconsin near a lake that used to freeze over. We'd go skating there with the other high school kids, so I can skate forward, in a circle." Britta winced. "You need to do more than that to play hockey." "Yeah, that's what I thought. But this big guy put me in the hockey gear, and he didn't really listen to me."
I sense he doesn't listen to anyone. Over 7 feet. Looks like he actually met Genghis Khan. Yeah, that's him. That's Bo Novikov. He became team captain last year. He's been out of control ever since. He's gone through like 8 enforcers. I think 2 are still in rehab. Interesting. And what position is the enforcer? It's not really a position. Not an official position. It's just a player that kicks the ass of anyone who plays dirty or fucks with team members who aren't as fighty. Max was quiet for a moment before she said, I could do that. Except you still need to know how to skate. Max opened her mouth, and Britta quickly added, backward and forward. Oh, yeah, that's a problem. Do you want me to tell Novikov you can't do it? I'm one of the few people he listens to without walking away mid-sentence, and I'm not sure I want to hear my brother whine because you got hurt and Charlie's pissed about it. Are guns involved? In ice hockey? No. Knives? Or bombs? Or Peruvian drug lords? Not that I'm aware of. Then Charlie won't care. Bo Novikov skated over to the pair, stopped, looked back and forth between them. What are you two talking about? He asked, looking a little paranoid. Just plotting your death, Max replied. Then she laughed. Kidding. Funny. Britta cleared her throat and said to Novikov, She can't skate. She's stunting. That's promising. Is it? Holding her broken arm against her chest, Deanne asked a question she hadn't ever asked before. Am I getting old? Nah. Dutch, one of the few Wolverines they had in the group, forced himself into a sitting position, his arms around his ribs, blood pouring from his cheek, the side of his neck, and out of his mouth. That last was especially troubling. She was just really pissed. You said she'd be reasonable, Malone accused, her voice muffled because of her broken nose. The cat doctor kneeling in front of her, trying to put the pieces back. For MacKilligan, that was reasonable, especially when it comes to Charlie MacKilligan and her sisters. Deanne glared at Dr. Davis. Hey, cat, mind helping me? My arm's broken. Davis barely glanced at Dee. It'll heal. I gotta fix this. Dutch forced himself to his big feet. You better do something or we're gonna have to put him down. Dutch, despite the pain it caused to his ribs, crouched in front of Deanne and said, If you go near my friends with anything but a job offer and a smile, the last thing you'll have to worry about, Smith, are the MacKilligans. You threatening me? Yeah, he replied casually. I'm a Wolverine. We're crazy. He grinned. And you haven't even met the rest of my family and friends. You and the group, stay away from the MacKilligans. I'll handle them. He stood, groaning all the way before slowly stumbling out. Once he was gone, Deanne looked at Malone. Boy's gonna get a rude awakening. Is he? Malone asked. Just one of those bitches kicked our ass, and we're the best. The best! Her eyes crossed. Ow. Yeah, Davis said. I'd suggest you not yell, sweetie. Is no one going to help me? Davis motioned someone over, and a nurse crouched in front of Deanne. Can't even get a doctor? Deanne complained. The nurse, carefully examining Deanne's arm, warned, Don't make me get my staple gun. We also have another problem, Malone said, holding up her phone. Just got a text. BPC is heading this way. Bear Preservation Council, the International Protection Agency of the Bear Nation. Why? Deanne asked. Just a shot in the dark, but Berg was the one who got that crazy bitch out of here before she could finish either of us off. Maybe he's asked BPC to protect her and her sisters. BPC hates honey badgers, and none of them girls are mixed with bear, so they ain't hybrids the BPC would protect. Maybe he's got something to barter with. Or a family member high up in the BPC. Either way, we better call Rick. Her mate? What for? Malone stared at her from 2 eyes already purple and swelling. Because unlike you and me, Rick has never fought bears at a wedding.
That wasn't our fault.
Malone sighed. Sweetie, no one cares.
I'm not calling Rick. I'll handle this. We'll get those girls to the group offices and take it from there.
How? We couldn't even get one of them to listen to a man she's known for over a decade. Just a conversation without even moving to a new location. What makes you think you can do better? Using her good arm, Deanne retrieved her phone.
We have a bunch of people sitting around who get paid to do what I tell them to.
Excuse me if that doesn't put me at ease.
Deanne got to her feet.
Get me a sling, she told the nurse.
And you just sit there with your kitty cat friend trying to look pretty.
Malone grinned despite the blood on her face and replied, Unlike you, Fido, I don't have to try. Chapter 14. Cringing, Britta reached down and grabbed the honey badger's arm. She pulled Max to her feet.
We should stop this, Britta said again.
I'm okay.
We haven't even touched you yet, Britta explained. You can't skate even when no one is on you.
Looks that way, doesn't it?
The marauder skated over to them, stopped.
What? Novikov asked.
Britta decided to step in. She's done.
We've barely started, and yet she's bleeding profusely.
Novikov frowned.
You're not even on the team. You're a practice player.
Britta skated in front of Novikov.
Your point? My point is this has nothing to do with you.
She's a friend. I'm helping her.
Max tapped her on the arm.
We're friends? She asked.
Quiet, tiny female. She's fine, he insisted.
She's not fine. She can't skate.
She can learn.
Reese Lee Reed, a wolf from the Smith pack, skated around the trio and asked, So are we practicing today, or just gabbing like girlfriends? Without taking his eyes off Britta, Novikov swung out his fist, sending poor Reese flying across the ice and into the opposite wall.
Wow, Max softly let out. We cannot teach her to skate well enough to play hockey at the pro level. It's not possible. It's not like it's full human hockey with those tiny little guys playing, not one sow among them. This is just setting her up to get killed.
You're annoying me.
I'm sorry, my rational logic goes against your hysterical plans to use a woman like a mad dog.
I'm actually a honey badger.
Shut up, Britta snarled. And Max did, for a little bit. But then, while Britta and Novikov bickered, she abruptly moved between the pair and held up one leg to Novikov.
Get this skate off.
Without realizing what he was doing, he was so busy trying to rationalize his crazy scheme, Novikov quickly untied the skate. Then he untied the other when Max lifted it up. Once she had the skates off, she started walking off the ice, pulling off first her hockey shirt, then her elbow pads, then her shoulder pads. When she dropped the shoulder pads to the ice, the small female suddenly took off. Catching the move, Britta and Novikov stopped arguing and turned to watch. Max charged across the ice toward the stairs that led to the bleachers.
Uh-oh,
Britta muttered when she realized that Coop's big sister was standing in those bleachers, talking to some lion. Her back was to Max, so she had no idea the crazed honey badger was headed right for her. Britta started to skate over there, hoping to stop what she saw as the possible slaughter of Coop's sister. True, Tony Jean-Louis Parker got on her last nerve, but Britta didn't want her hurt either. But before she could even get down the entire length of the rink, Max suddenly turned toward the protective glass wall that kept the audience safe from the play. Using her claws, she scrambled up and over. Once she touched down, she ran on the bleachers toward where Tony was standing. When she was about 4 bleachers or so below her, the badger launched herself up and over and into the lion. Startled, Tony jumped back as Max slammed the lion to the ground and began pummeling the cat with brutal fists. Understanding that Tony wasn't the focus of the badger's rage, Britta slowed down. Maybe this was Max's old boyfriend. There were a few men in Britta's past that she'd love to slap around like chew toys. It took the lion a bit to understand what was going on, but once he did, he began fighting back. First, he tried to push Max off and then punched her back. But if Max felt his blows, you couldn't tell. She didn't scream or growl or say anything. She simply kept punching. Then finally, she grabbed the lion's big head, her fingers digging into his mane, and slammed it against the floor 2, 3, 5 times. When he seemed dazed, Britta watched Max slip her hand into her hockey pants and whip out a blade that had Britta, Novikov, and Reed bolting toward her. Max swung her arm up over her head. The point glinted in the bright stadium lights seconds before it arced down toward the lion's chest. They would never reach him. All 3 of them were fast, but not as fast as Max and her blade. But Britta had to try. It was in her nature. She pushed her body as hard as she could, trying to reach. Inches from the lion's chest, Max's wrist was caught, held. Charlie yanked her sister up and away, pulling her to the stairs and keeping her there with nothing more than a glare. The pair stared at each other, neither speaking. A silent conversation only siblings would understand. Finally, Max smirked and slipped the blade back into her hockey pants, like they had been made to hold blades or something. Max walked up the stairs, and that's when Britta saw Berg and Dag. Neither of her brothers was a big fan of hockey, so she knew they hadn't come here for her. They were here for something else. For the MacKilligan sisters. Charlie didn't move until Max was near the exit doors. The she-hybrid started to follow her sister, not realizing that the lion male had gotten to his feet and now stood behind her, bloody and bruised. He didn't seem to notice her, though, his gaze firmly locked on little Stevie, who stood beside Coop and his younger brother Kyle, the trio standing near the exit doors Max was about to walk through. When Stevie turned away, head down, Britta gave a small snarl. Now she wanted to hit the guy. And maybe it was the sound Britta made, or perhaps it was just sisterly instinct. Whatever it was, Charlie turned toward the lion, her fingers curled into a fist, and that fist swung out and slammed into the male's face. Britta cringed. She could hear his jaw breaking from where she stood. "She has got a hell of a punch," Reed muttered beside Britta. The lion went down with a pathetic whimper, hitting the floor he'd just picked himself up from. Charlie crouched down and spoke to him, her voice so low Britta couldn't understand what she was saying. But she could guess. She could guess that Charlie was making it clear the beating he'd gotten from Max was nothing compared to the one he'd get from Charlie if he came sniffing around her sister again. Britta had said something similar to Dion Kapowski back in the 9th grade after she'd broken Dag's heart.
"Think we can teach that one to skate?"
Novikov asked. Britta let out a sigh.
"No."
"I thought we talked about this, Max. No killing other shifters with a knife or a gun in front of witnesses. You know that." Standing outside the practice ice rink, Charlie grabbed Max's hand and held it up. "Next time, use your claws."
No,
Berg quickly stated, stepping between the sisters.
"Unless someone is physically attacking you, no killing. How about that? I saw you charge him, Max. He didn't attack you first."
"But I warned him," Max said. "I told him if I ever saw him again, I would beat him until he was dead."
Berg nodded. "I understand the logic, but I'm not sure in a court of law that would be an acceptable excuse for murder. Unreasonable, I know, but what can you do?"
Tony came out of the rink and walked over to Charlie. "So, I shouldn't have him around my sisters, should I?" "Nope." "Got it. Thanks." Then Tony left to track down the rest of her siblings. Stevie began, but Charlie cut her off by placing her hand over her baby sister's entire face. "Do not say you're sorry. You didn't do anything wrong." Charlie moved her hand to her sister's shoulder and pulled her close, kissing her on the forehead. "I'm sorry you had to see him again. And that wasn't your fault either. Besides, I'm an adult. I'm not a kid anymore. I should be able to handle seeing him. I should be—" "What?" Charlie asked. "What? What?"
Charlie
Her eyes suddenly grew wide as she stared behind Max.
"Oh, my God! Dutch!"
Max looked over her shoulder and immediately started laughing. "Dude, what the fuck happened to your face?" Holding on to his ribs, he glared at Charlie.
"Want to tell them?"
Charlie rolled her eyes, pursed her lips, her left eyebrow raised, but she said nothing. Her expression made Berg grin. She could be such a rude badass when she wanted to be. "Charlie did this to you?" Max asked. She looked him over. "Why? What did you do?"
"What did I do?"
"Charlie's not me or Stevie. If she beat the shit out of you, it's because she thought you deserved it." Max paused, then asked, "Is this about those people you work for?"
Charlie slapped her hand against Dutch's damaged chest and, ignoring his pained whimpering, she pushed him out of the way so that she stood right in front of Max. "What do you know about the people he works for?"
"Not much. Every time he tried to tell me, I changed the subject, because I couldn't have been more bored by the topic. And I'm definitely not taking a job where I answer to anyone. I like being my own boss."
Stevie stepped up beside her sister and, staring straight at her, asked, "What is it you do, exactly?"
"You didn't have to beat Dutch up," Max continued, her hand landing on her baby sister's shoulder. With one healthy push, she sent the slight female about 20 feet away until she hit the wall beside the rink doors. "I wasn't going to take any job." "Dumb ass, they didn't want to offer you a job. They wanted to kill us. They saw us in the Bronx."
"Actually,"
Dutch interrupted, moving close to the pair again.
"No, that was not the plan."
"So you say."
"So I know. I really just wanted them to see Max's skill, but not surprisingly, they are now interested in all of you."
"Interested in all of us to do what?" Stevie asked before she looked at Max and hissed at her, like a house cat, entire face pulling back, small fangs erupting from her gums. To be really honest, Berg couldn't understand what the group would want with Stevie, unless they had a science lab he was unaware of. "It doesn't matter," Charlie told her sisters. "It's all a lie. They want us dead." Dutch's hands curled into fists.
"Do you really think," he growled, "that I'd let anything happen to you guys? That I'd be involved in any way with people that would harm you guys simply for being who you are?"
It was the silence Berg noticed first. It was never silent in the sports center unless it was closed for the night. But here it was early evening, and the place was dead silent. He looked up and saw that their small group was surrounded by armed men and women, shifters of different species and breeds. Deanne Smith, bloody and bruised, her arm in a sling, standing behind them. And as soon as Berg noticed it, the sisters, Dag, and Dutch noticed it too. Dutch raised one finger and offered,
"I know this looks bad."
Charlie laughed. She couldn't help it. "I know this looks bad?" Yes, this looked bad. Very bad. But she wasn't exactly surprised. Whether it was what Stevie shifted into, Max's ability to decimate with a blade, or her own skills with guns, the MacKilligan sisters were more often seen as a liability than an asset. Unless, of course, one needed a brilliant scientist to create designer meth. Then people were happy to overlook Stevie's issues. Berg gazed at her, and Charlie wondered if he was worried that she'd lost her mind. Her ill-timed laughs often caused that sort of concern. But ludicrous things would always be funny to her. Berg raised a brow, and now she understood that he was asking her what she wanted to do. He was ready to back her play despite the risk to him and his brother. Before Charlie could make a move, however, Dutch focused on the wolf whose ass Charlie had kicked.
"What are you doing, Deanne?"
he asked. His voice was calm, but Charlie had known Dutch since the idiot was a kid. He was a calm-before-the-storm kind of Wolverine. "I think we all need to go to our offices and have us a nice, civilized little talk. Y'all wouldn't mind that, would you?" Charlie cringed. That accent. Ugh.
"That wasn't the deal, Deanne,"
Dutch reminded her.
I think you need to mind yours, little man."
Mind his what?
D.
The wolf pushed past the others and stepped in front of Dutch. "Don't test me, boy." That's when Max moved. All Charlie could see was a flash of steel, and a moment later a blade was pressed against the wolf's throat, and another blade was pressed against Max's. The wolf and the badger eyed each other, both appearing impressed by the other's knife skill while each was ready to kill at a moment's notice. Charlie said, "Step back, Max." Max looked at her over her shoulder. "Now," Charlie pushed. Then she jerked her head toward the Dunn brothers. "Wait," Berg said before Max could move. "You're worried about me?" "I can't fight them and look out for you too, or your brother." The two bears glanced at each other and back at Charlie.
"You're kidding, right?"
Dag asked. "No. You two are used to military rules of engagement. We're MacKilligans. The only rule for us is to leave no witnesses." Charlie moved her attention to the she-wolf. "We'll go with you," she said, shrugging. "It's just as easy to leave no witnesses there as here." With Max's blade still pressed against her jugular, the wolf's eyes narrowed on Charlie. Her expression told Charlie the she-wolf was remembering how the three MacKilligan sisters had wiped out that room full of armed men. What thin, compact little Stevie shifted into. What Max had pulled. What Charlie had done just 5 minutes ago. But now the she-wolf was debating whether she should have them all killed right here, right now.
"Berg Dunn?" a female voice called out. "Is Berg Dunn here?"
Frowning, Berg looked over the heads of the shifters surrounding him and raised his hand.
"Yes?"
"Hi, I'm Tonya. Bela Ben Ziv sent me."
Charlie had no idea who that was, but she saw Berg's shoulders relax a little.
"Your request has been approved," Tanya went on. "Just let us know if you need anything else."
Tanya, busy looking at her phone, began to walk away, but Berg's, actually, stopped her.
"Uh-huh?"
she asked, glancing up at him. He gestured to the armed shifters surrounding them.
"Oh, right. Sorry."
She motioned to someone Charlie couldn't see.
"Over here, ladies."
Charlie heard a growl and realized it had come from the she-wolf, a growl of annoyance. Laughing and chatting, a number of super-tall, and some very wide, women surrounded the group gathered around Charlie and the others. These women were armed, but none of them had pulled their weapons yet. Instead, they just kept talking among themselves. Stevie whimpered, and she suddenly crept behind Charlie and buried her head against her back. She was panting. All these women, they weren't just shifters. They were bear sows, something that seemed to concern even the she-wolf. But she wasn't giving up the MacKilligans without a fight.
"Excuse me, Tanya,"
the she-wolf practically snarled,
"but these ladies are under our,
protection at the moment.
So we'd appreciate if y'all would—" "Sorry,"
another female voice called out, as a 6'9" female rushed up to the group. "So sorry. I had to get the kids from skating practice." And the kids were with her. 3 of them. One in hockey gear, the other in a skating dress, and the third so small she was hanging from her armed mother's big shoulders. The mother sow happily looked around the group before cheerily asking, "So, what are we doing?" That's when the she-wolf's compatriots lowered their weapons, and one of them said, "Sorry, Deanne. We're out." Not clear on how disgusted she should be, Charlie softly asked Berg, "Did your bear friends just use that woman's children as shields?"
"Not at all. I know Stephanie. She's a big multitasker. She brought her kids because she's trying to do a lot of things at once. The beauty is, the other breeds instinctively know not to startle or upset a sow with cubs. None of them would be left standing, and they know it." He winked at her before focusing back on the action. The she-wolf stepped away from Max, both eyeing each other as they slipped their blades back into the holsters. Without another word, the she-wolf walked off, those who'd come with her long gone. "Tell Bela,"
Berg said to Tanya.
"Thank you."
Sure,
she replied, texting into her phone.
Just keep in mind, they're only under their protection for as long as they're living on Carthage Street. Understand?
I understand.
Okay, great. Bela will inform the other organizations. Still focused on her phone, she started to walk back the way she'd come. The others will get you to your car since that Smith is not to be trusted. Okay? Great. Thanks. She walked into one of the sows, who pushed her away with a good amount of force, but Tanya didn't stumble or let the shove tear her attention away from her phone. Apparently, nothing could do that. Berg smiled down at Charlie, but then frowned.
Charlie, are you okay?
Yeah. Why?
You look like you're in pain.
Oh. She motioned behind her. Stevie's attached herself to my back. Her claws are digging.
Should I pry her?
No. Charlie shook her head. If you do that, there will be tearing and ripping. So let's just pretend that we're all normal. That this weird situation, my sister attached to me like a spider monkey and all of us surrounded by the players of the WNBA, is completely commonplace. She clapped her hands together. Okay, let's go. The group started off toward the exit, but Max grabbed Dutch's t-shirt and pulled him back. That was the group you were trying to get me to work for?
Yeah. What?
Sweetie, she said, laughing. Seriously?
So you scare them, Max. You scare everybody.
That's not what I'm talking about. That she-wolf?
Deanne Smith.
You ever watch those dog trainers on TV who handle pit bulls?
Sometimes.
They always say don't put two male pit bulls together. Don't put two female pit bulls together. She gestured between where the she-wolf had been standing and herself. Her and me? Two female pit bulls. You put us in the same cage, Dutch. One of us is not coming out. Chapter 15. Rick Van Holtz was no longer surprised when his wife entered a room covered in bruises. Deanne performed a very dangerous job, and that meant, over the years, he'd sewn up knife cuts, cleared out bullet holes, and packed more ice than he could think of on bruised and battered body parts. Yet he wasn't sure how offering 3 women a job had led to this. Her arm in a sling, Deanne sat in a chair across from his desk. With a painful limp and a brutalized face, Sella Malone made her way across his office and sat in the other chair. The pair sat and didn't say a word, which was unusual. Not for Deanne. She'd never been chatty. But usually when the pair came in together, they were already in the middle of an argument about something. Yet here they were, silent and severely damaged.
Should I assume we don't have any new employees?
Rick guessed. Deanne slumped down in her chair. Sella began studying something on the corner of his pristine desk. Normally he'd ask, how bad is this? But he already kind of knew. It wasn't every day one received a call from the head of the BPC herself to tell him, stay away from the MacKilligan sisters. They're under our protection now.
Did the bears do this to you?
He finally asked. But then something shocking happened. Deanne slumped farther down in her chair, her gaze moving across the room until it focused on the wall behind his head. Sella suddenly became fascinated with the metal band of her watch. Now Rick was completely confused. He took a moment to study their wounds and realized there was nothing bear-like about them. No giant claw marks across their throats, no obvious signs of head trauma from claws or teeth. They had all their eyes, and nothing had been ripped off them, like their arms or legs or lips. No, when Rick studied the damage done to both women, what he saw was a beating. A harsh, you pissed me off beating.
Are you telling me the MacKilligan sisters did this to you?
Sella cleared her throat, fussed with her watch band a little more before finally admitting, well, one of them. Rick's entire body jerked a little before he attempted to clarify that statement with,
while the other 2 held you down?
The pair exchanged glances, and Deanne suddenly shot up out of her chair and began to pace. Sella, however, dropped back in hers and blew out a large breath, but neither spoke.
"Oh," Rick said. "I see." "First, there's Cats and House Securities," the weasel explained to Charlie and her sisters while Berg drove them home. "They protect the cat nation."
"There's a nation of cats?" Max asked.
"So many of them are solitary or have small families. They don't have big packs or prides, so they have no choice but to consider themselves a nation of cats. And then there's the group."
"That's who you betrayed us for?" Charlie asked Dutch, and Berg smirked, glancing at his brother in the passenger seat to see the identical smirk on his triplet's face.
"Okay," the weasel sighed in frustration. "One more time with feeling for the back seat. I didn't betray you. I was trying to get you bitches a job. Well, at least one bitch. And that job has an employer-match IRA and artery care. You won't find those kinds of benefits in Silicon Valley." "Anyway," he continued on, "the group protects all shifters, including hybrids, honey badgers, and wolverines."
"Honey badgers don't want your help," Max reminded her friend.
"The group is aware of how the badgers feel, but they've still decided to include you, as well as my kind, despite those feelings. And the bears have the BPC, Bear Preservation Council."
"That sounds like a non-profit charity." "I think I gave them money once," Stevie said.
"You?"
"One of my coworkers is a big supporter. She was selling cookies or something to raise money. And you know how much I love a good chocolate cookie. But she's not a bear."
"BPC is a charity. They're all about the preservation and protection of bears worldwide."
"And they're the ones protecting us." Charlie suddenly leaned forward, her head between Berg and Dunn. "And my question is why? Why are they protecting us? Are you paying them?"
"No."
"Because we're not bears. I'm barely badger. Stevie's more cat. Max is irritating. Hey, so why are they helping us?"
"Because I asked them to."
Berg shrugged when Charlie kept staring at him.
"I don't know what you want me to say."
"The truth. Have you given them your lives? Do you now owe them a blood debt? Do you have to kill for this?"
"Wow," Dag finally said. "You are really not used to people helping you."
"Because they don't unless they're getting something out of it. And I don't want to put you guys at any more risk."
"You haven't put us at risk,"
Berg insisted. "You've been shot and stabbed."
"Not because of you."
"No, because of my father. I have brought his curse into your life."
"Maybe the bear just likes being helpful,"
the weasel suggested. But Charlie immediately pointed a damning finger at him. "I don't talk to traitors." "He's not a traitor," Max said. "He's just a pathetic, pathetic friend."
"And thank you very much."
"Well, dude, what did you expect? You had to know once Charlie found out she was going to be pissed. You're just lucky she only beat the shit out of you." She paused, then added, "You're lucky you still have your arms."
"Ungrateful. You're all ungrateful." "You tried to capture them?"
"Well, if you're gonna make it sound wrong," Deanne complained.
"Deanne, these aren't wild lions we're bringing in from Africa. These are human beings who have clearly been trained to kill when necessary. Why didn't you just talk to them?"
"We tried that. They'd already run. And we can't let that one girl out in the world running around."
"You mean Stevie MacKilligan? You're worried about her? She's managed to go 24 years without rampaging in downtown Tokyo. I don't see why you couldn't have trusted her to hold on for a little bit longer."
"Don't get that tone with me."
"Well, when you're being irrational..."
"Irrational? Me?"
"What do you call it when you try to round up shifters you, and I'm quoting, don't much like the look of?"
"You didn't see her once she shifted."
"I didn't have to. I've seen Novikov. He has tusks, like a goddamn walrus."
"She's bigger than he is shifted. She's got to be at least 20 feet long, maybe longer. That ain't right. That's..."
"Please don't say unholy."
"Unholy."
Rick briefly placed his head on his desk.
I love how your Christianity only comes into play when you don't have a rational argument for something you don't like.
I know what I know, and I know what I saw.
Rick sat up straight again, focused on the head coach of the hockey team he owned.
Sella, your thoughts?
I'm wondering if the two oldest can learn how to ice skate. She nodded. They've both got mighty fighting skills, and the middle one, she's dumb enough to be an enforcer for Novikov. Rick placed his elbows on his desk and rested his chin in the palms of his hands.
So, let me sum up. We've got 1 vote for total annihilation, and 1 vote for forcing them to join the hockey team. Am I correct?
Yes, both females replied. As soon as Berg turned onto the street, Charlie knew something was wrong.
"Why are all those bears standing in front of our house?" Stevie asked, panic in her voice rising. "They've come to eat us, haven't they?"
"Oh, my God!" Max exploded. "No one wants to eat your scrawny ass."
"I have a high metabolism."
Charlie snapped her fingers. "Stop it," she ordered.
How do you do that?
Berg asked when both younger sisters immediately fell silent. Years of training and abuse, my friend. Years of training and abuse.
You're like one of those Russian bear trainers.
Yeah. It's great until they suddenly turn on you on live TV and rip your scalp off. You do know we're right here? Max asked. Shut up. Berg stopped the car and Charlie got out, ordering her sisters to stay here until But Max was already out of the car and walking toward the crowd of bears. Stevie had also gotten out and had climbed the closest big tree, where she nonsensically hissed at no one in particular. Sighing, Charlie closed the car door and rushed to catch up with Max. "What's going on, Tiny?" she asked when she saw their landlord.
"Something is in your... What happened to your face?"
"It's nothing. I just got in a fight with a wolf and... What was the other one?"
"Siberian tiger,"
Max replied.
"Yeah, Siberian tiger."
"Oh, and him." She pointed at Dutch. Tiny stared at Dutch and back at Charlie several times before informing Dutch.
"She kicked your ass." "I am aware," Dutch snapped. "Can we now get back to what you were saying?" "Something is in your house."
He screwed his nose up.
"It tried to cloak its scent. I mostly smell bear spray, but who puts bear spray on just to sneak into our neighborhood? I can't imagine anyone that stupid."
But Charlie could. She looked at Max, and her sister's expression told her she thought the same thing. "Where's your dog, Berg?" Charlie asked. Berg whistled, then called out, "Hey, shithead." Charlie growled a little. "You need to give that dog a proper name."
"How was that not a proper name?"
"Don't—" She stopped herself. Now was not the time. Berg's dog came around from the back of his house and took his time trotting across the street to reach the group. Once he stood next to them, Charlie bent over slightly to stare in the dog's eyes. Even on all fours, the dog was goddamn huge, and then whispered into his ear. With a bark, he ran toward the house and leaped into an open window that Charlie knew for a fact she'd left closed and locked.
"What did you say to him?"
Dag asked. "That's between canines." She smirked. "You wouldn't understand." They heard a huge yelp from the upstairs. Then came the sounds of things crashing, running, more crashing, some screaming, a few barks of pain that did not come from a dog, until finally her father crashed through an upstairs window, rolled down the shingled roof, fell off the roof, and landed in such a way that should have killed even him. His neck hit the ground first, legs bent up and over his head. And although the bears gasped in shock, neither Charlie nor her sister were remotely fazed when Freddie MacKilligan unrolled himself and got to his feet, seemingly unharmed.
"You,"
the asshole said, pointing an accusing finger at Charlie,
"sent that vicious bitch up to attack me."
Charlie answered that accusation by slamming her fist into her father's face. Max slammed her fist into the other side of his face. That's when Stevie moved from the safety of the tree.
"No, no, no!" She scrambled down the trunk and ran over to the group. She had to grit her teeth to make her way through the crowd of bears, but she still did it. And she did it for him. Stevie planted herself in front of the whining idiot who was busy trying to put his jaw back into place. Not surprisingly, this was not, and would not be, the last time someone punched their father's jaw out of its socket. It had happened so much in the past he didn't even need a doctor anymore. He just had to jerk it back into place. The bears cringed when they heard the snap. "Ungrateful bitches!" he barked when he could speak again. Max hissed in warning before unleashing the blade-like claws on each hand. She wanted to bathe in their father's blood when she took his life. "What the fuck are you doing here?" Charlie demanded. "A little respect, please. I am your father." "Fuck your respect, bitch. Do you know what you've done? Do you even care?" "See?" her father asked. "No one. This is why I need a son. You're useless to me. You don't even know what I've been through, and already you are accusing me. I'm accusing you because you're an idiot, and you don't have a son because your DNA is as fucked up and as impotent as you are." It was a low blow, one meant to wound and hurt. But no child wanted to hear that even the father they hated had never wanted them, simply because they were born with vaginas. The missile she'd sent over his bow found its mark. Her father grabbed her by her t-shirt, curling his fist in the cotton material and yanking her close. Charlie wasn't scared. She'd stopped fearing her father decades ago. Plus, she had Max there. Those claws were flying back, readying a strike so brutal the bastard would easily lose his arm. But before Max could finish the attack, Berg Dunn's big body was between Charlie and her father, Dag on the other side. And the other bears? Ready to move. His neighbor grizzlies had allowed their grizzly humps to pop. There were fangs, claws, all unleashed and at the ready. Somewhere behind their father, Stevie whimpered, and Charlie knew her poor sister was using all her energy not to run screaming from the street, the neighborhood, the state, the country. With utter calm, his gaze lowered, Berg growled, "Sir, I'd strongly suggest you move your hand away from your daughter. And I mean do it now." Stupid, but always a survivor, Freddie MacKilligan examined what was happening around him with fresh eyes. Stevie and Max might be the smallest ones there, but they were also the least in danger. All those bare eyes were focused on Freddie, and he knew it. He let Charlie's t-shirt go and raised both hands, palms out, showing those surrounding them that he was not a danger. "Now if you'd step back a few feet," Berg suggested, ordered, his gaze still not on Freddie, although Charlie didn't know why. When her father didn't move quickly enough, Berg's dog reappeared, putting his big body between Freddie and Berg, snarling and snapping until her father stumbled back. Then the dog came around Berg, nosed Dag out of the way, and sat down beside Charlie. She reached over and patted the dog's giant head. "You need to go," Max said to their father. "Now. I need a place to stay." He'd barely gotten that last word out before Max and Charlie started laughing. The big, loud, mean laugh they only used when it came to their father. "Fuck you! Go!" Charlie said, still laughing. "You're just going to throw me out on the street?" "Yes," Charlie and Max said together. He went for the weak link. "Stevie?" He tried for a sad expression. "You wouldn't throw your daddy out, would you, sweetie?" Stevie took off her backpack and dug her wallet out. She yanked out several bills. "Take this. Go." "Stevie!" "You need to go. I can only protect you for so long, and even I am running out of patience here." "But I'm your father." "I know," Stevie said on a sigh, tugging the straps of her pack back onto her shoulders. "I double-checked my DNA. You're definitely my father." And she couldn't have sounded more defeated by this information. "But all my therapists say that I need to cut myself off from toxic relationships. And, Daddy, you're toxic." "This is their fault, isn't it?" he said. his accusing glare lashing over at Charlie and Max. "They've turned you against me."
Stevie shook her head. "It's like you don't even try to listen to me."
"I'm not going to let these two evil females come between us. I love you, Stevie. You're my favorite daughter."
With a cringe, Stevie asked, "How is that a good thing to say? For any reason?" She motioned him away when he tried to hug her. "Daddy, just go." Fed up, Charlie pulled her cell phone from the back pocket of her jeans.
"What are you doing?"
her father demanded. "I'm calling Uncle Will and telling him exactly where you are at this very moment."
"You wouldn't dare."
Charlie briefly held up her phone. "I have an international plan, and he knows you stole his money."
"I did not."
Charlie paused to let her shoulders slump in exhaustion. "Really, Dad? Seriously? Of course you stole that man's money, and I hope he cuts your throat for it." Freddie slapped her phone out of her hands, and Charlie had her gun pulled and pointed at her father's head. But before she could squeeze the trigger, Berg had picked her up and moved her away. Dag had one hand around Freddie's throat, moving the much smaller Badger back, ignoring his thrashing and curses. "Get her out of here," Max said to Berg, tossing him Charlie's phone. "Otherwise she's going to kill him." He took Max's direction and carried Charlie toward his house. But unable to keep her rage in check, she screamed, "This isn't over, old man! I will hunt you down and kill you! I'm calling Will and telling him exactly where you are. I will have all the MacKilligans looking for your dumb ass, and when he cuts your heart out, I will dine on it with a good Scottish ale, you worthless son of a bitch!" Berg carried her inside his house and into his living room. He placed her on the couch and sat down beside her, taking the gun from her. He cleared the chamber and dropped the mag, placing all the pieces on the coffee table in front of them. Done with that, he relaxed back on the couch, his arm touching her shoulder. For several long minutes they sat like that, in silence, until he finally repeated, "With a good Scottish ale." Charlie laughed and couldn't immediately stop. Only her father could make her this psychotic. With every other part of her life she was reasonable, calm, rational. But with her idiot father... She rested against Berg's big arm, tears of laughter streaming down her face. "It was so specific," Berg noted, his laughter joining hers. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "Bringing my family's crazy to your nice, quiet street." "Don't even worry about it. Bears love this shit." She wiped her tears, gazed at him. "They do?" "We say we hate it, but we're all so nosy." He shrugged. "We really love watching when it's not happening to us. Sorry." "As long as my father's crazy isn't putting you in a bad situation with your neighbors. I don't care if they watch every second of the drama. It's the least we can do for you guys. You know, entertain." "You sure it's okay to leave Max with your dad? She looked about as ready to kill him as you did." "She reacts to me. If I'm not there, she should be fine. Besides, she wouldn't upset Stevie by killing him. She knows she'd never hear the end of it. We could be in an old age home, Max on her deathbed, and Stevie would find a way to bring that shit up and make her feel guilty all over again." "Wow, she's good." Charlie smiled, proud of her sisters for completely different reasons. Stevie can learn anything from a book, and when it comes to psychiatry, she's read them all. So she wields guilt like a master swordsman. And Max isn't nearly as much of a psychopath as the social worker said, because otherwise she wouldn't feel any guilt at all. At least that's what I tell myself. All the time. Grabbing her father by the back of the neck, Max dragged his dumb ass into the house, with Stevie leading the way, because she was too afraid to remain behind with the bears. Dag took it upon himself to get the neighbors to disperse, although Max heard a few of them ask if Charlie was upset enough to start baking again. Once in the kitchen, Max shoved their father away. He spun around, fist pulled back. But all Max had to do was cock her head to the side and stare at him. He quickly changed his approach. He lowered his fist, smiled, and opened his arms wide. "Honey!" She held up her hand. "Don't even bother. Just get your shit and go." "I have nowhere to go. They're out to kill me. Because you stole from your own brother. That's not Dad. It was an accident." Max glanced over at Stevie, but her little sister just sadly shook her head before dropping into one of the kitchen chairs. "Okay, well, not an accident," her father corrected, "but where's the money, Dad?" When her father did nothing but stare at her, Max guessed, "Someone stole it from you, didn't they?" "It's not my fault," he cried. It was the man's refrain. According to their aunt, he'd been using it since he could talk. It was his first full sentence. "But Will is blaming me anyway. He's always been out to get me. You have to help me." "No," Stevie said before Max could. "No, Daddy, we don't." "You'd throw me back out there?" he cried, arms sweeping wide. "We don't have to," Stevie reasoned. "The bears will do it for us." She looked behind Freddie, and Max moved so she could see as well. Dag stood outside the open kitchen window, brown eyes watching their father closely.
"Everything all right?"
the bear asked.
"You guys need anything?"
"Not yet, Dag," Max said, "but don't go anywhere." Freddie's head dropped, realizing he couldn't manipulate his way into a place to stay. Not even with Stevie. "Fine," he said. "I'll go. But do you think I can get a little more cash?" Max asked. And when her father simply gazed at her, she finally snapped, "How the fuck do you steal over $100 million and still have no goddamn money?" Chapter 16. Charlie stood. "I better go back over there."
"That sounds like a really bad idea to me."
She nodded. "It is. I can't lie, but—" Berg gripped her arm, and she thought he was about to pull her back onto the couch, but he stood and led her to his kitchen. He stopped and grabbed 2 beers from the refrigerator, then continued to lead her out the back door. He stopped on the porch, closing the screen door and dropping to the top step. Still holding onto her arm, he guided Charlie until she sat on the step beneath him. He handed her a beer and held on to his own. Charlie honestly didn't know what she'd expected after that, but she was totally unprepared for what he did do, which was absolutely nothing. She kept waiting for something, one of those dude moves, as Max called them. A stroke on the back of her neck, a kiss to her cheek, a massage for her shoulders. But nope, he just drank his beer, quietly. Charlie became so anxious she finally asked, "What are you doing?"
"Me? Nothing."
"Yeah. Why are you doing nothing?"
"Do you want me to do something?"
"No."
"Then, okay."
"I guess I'm just used to guys making the move."
"What guys?"
"Just guys."
"Full human guys?"
Charlie sipped her beer. "Yeah, mostly."
"Well, most shifter guys aren't making the move."
"Why not?"
"We like our faces attached to us rather than on the floor, in front of us."
"You think I'd hurt you?"
"Not on purpose. My sister didn't mean to nearly tear her high school boyfriend's arm off when he snuck up behind her and tried to cover her eyes. That was an uncomfortable conversation for my dad with the kid's parents."
"So you're just cautious, in general?"
"Yes. I don't want my arms ripped off."
Charlie chuckled a little. "I don't think I could tear those arms off."
"I've seen you in a fight. Yes, you could."
Britta came around the side of the house, carrying a big duffel bag and her hockey stick, several other players with her. "What's going on?" she asked. "People are milling. I know there's drama afoot when people are milling."
"It's not a big thing,"
Berg said, attempting to protect Charlie from what he couldn't. The walking embarrassment that was her old man. "Just go to practice." Charlie frowned. "I thought you guys were at practice." "That was practice with Novikov. Then we come here, get a little snack, and go to the rink a couple of streets over so there's no sobbing."
I couldn't help it, one of the players announced, pacing away. He was really mean to me.
See? Britta asked. Now what's going on here?
Britta. My father's here, Charlie announced, refusing to pretend anything when it came to Freddie MacKilligan, being an asshole.
Why did he come here? Britta asked. Didn't he steal like 100 mil from his own brother? Britta.
What, Berg? Is that a secret?
It's nothing to be announced.
Charlie shrugged. Announce away. Charlie began stretching out her neck, tensing up at the thought of another confrontation with the idiot. I should go over there, she said again, but even she knew there was no real commitment behind the statement.
He's still over there?
Britta demanded. My sisters will try to get rid of him, but Stevie's too nice, and I don't want to see Max in prison, so... Britta dropped her bag and sticks. Come on, guys, she said to the other players before marching off. Charlie jumped up to block the sow, but Berg placed his hand against her hip and advised, You'll never stop her. But she doesn't have to.
It's not about have to for Britta. It's about her infinite will.
Getting blindingly frustrated by her father, Stevie was relieved when she heard the doorbell. She rushed to the front door and yanked it open. Yes? She asked the young man standing there. He sighed, shook his head.
You still don't remember me?
I should.
You just saw me a few hours ago. I'm Cooper.
When she continued to silently stare, he added,
Mr. Needy.
Oh, Kyle's brother. His gaze rolled up, and he took several deep breaths. Do you need something? She pushed. Or do you just want my autograph?
At first I felt bad about this, but now...
Gazing directly at her, he reached his arm out and yanked something over. Kyle.
Do you mind if he stays with you for a while?
Well, great. Kyle's brother shoved Kyle into the house, ignoring the fact that his brother tripped and nearly fell to the floor before he got control of his long legs.
I think the family needs a break from him, and you seemed like a better option than the Motel 6 near LaGuardia.
Disgusted, Stevie shook her head and chastised, I don't believe you people. Kyle Jean-Louis Parker is a genius, and as a fellow genius, I think all of you should treat him much better than you—
I can't,
the overrated pianist yelled out dramatically before stomping back to his waiting limo.
I can't,
he screamed again before getting in and disappearing down the street. Wow, Stevie said to poor Kyle as she started to close the door. Your brother has issues. Has he had any psychological tests?
Of course not, although I've highly recommended them.
Stevie nearly had the front door closed when something pushed it open again.
Hey, Stevie.
It was casually said, but it was casually said by a bear standing with several other bears and some dogs and cats. Without thinking, only instinct, Stevie arched her back and jumped back about 10 feet. Then she scrambled over a wingback chair and pressed her body into the corner. Britta gawked at her before stating, I don't know what the hell that was, but we'll not discuss it. I'm here for your father. Stevie gasped. Are you going to eat him? Britta started to answer, stopped, headed into the house instead. Her friends followed behind her.
Outstanding specimens, Kyle noted. Think they'll sit for me?
Aren't you worried they'll eat you?
No.
Lucky. Before Stevie could warn her father about the bears, there was another knock at her front door and a,
Hello?
Yes? She called out, afraid to move. The Asian male slowly walked inside, looking around.
What are you doing here?
Kyle asked the man with contempt. The male grinned when he saw Kyle.
Your sister ordered me here. I'm to stay by your side as long as you're away from your family, in case anyone tries to kill you, since you're just so important. I am important, peasant. Keep calling people peasants, you probably will get killed. Whatever. I'm hungry.
Kyle sniffed the air and headed toward the kitchen.
Hi,
the male said, giving Stevie a little wave.
Sorry about this.
Kyle should be protected. His brain is very important.
If you say so.
Stevie came around the chair and walked over to the man, holding out her hand. "Stevie MacKilligan."
"Shen-Li. We met at Livy's apartment when your sister tried to kill her cousin and the grizzly."
"Oh, I do think I remember you." Pulling her hand away, she asked, "Are you a bear?"
"Yes, giant panda."
"You know," she put her hand to her chest, "I'm not afraid of you at all."
"You shouldn't be." He grinned. "I'm very nice."
"And so cute." She grabbed his cheeks with both hands and twisted, "like a big stuffed toy." "Hey," Max said from behind her. "Dad's getting in an argument with some bears. I'm really hoping they kick his—" "Stevie! What the fuck are you doing?" "Isn't he cute?" Stevie demanded, her fingers still on Shen's face. But then her sister was next to her, slapping her hands down. Max didn't know what her idiot sister was thinking. Not only did the giant panda look confused and irritated, but he was armed. A holstered Sig Sauer attached to his jeans, just barely covered by a light jacket. He wasn't as big as the grizzlies and cats that had just stormed into their house, only 6 feet or so, but his shoulders were wide as hell, and there was nothing but muscles under that black t-shirt and jeans. And unlike Max herself, he didn't dye his black hair one color, instead letting those black stripes cut through his thick, white strands with pride. Sharp cheekbones accented the black eyes currently staring at Stevie. "But look at him!" Stevie practically squealed. "He's just so damn adorable!" Max didn't know what her sister was looking at. The man she saw was probably military-trained and would have no qualms about hurting people that got too close to those he was trying to protect. But Stevie was acting like he was one of those giant stuffed pandas at the front of a big toy store. Grabbing her sister's hands away from the poor guy's face, she yanked her across the room. She was about to start yelling when Britta came stomping through the house. She had their father caught by his hair, bending him over at the waist so he couldn't put up a fight. She kept him in front of her, pushing him while her friends backed her up by merely being there. "Your daughter wants you out, so you're out," Britta said to him calmly, "and if you come back, we'll rip the skin from your bones." She led him out of the house, and her friends disappeared with her. The door slammed shut, and Max let out a sigh. She didn't know how Charlie did this on a daily basis, maintain order. Honestly, it would have been easier just to make a run for it, or lay waste to everyone in a 5-mile radius. Illegal, but easier. Oh, and, yeah, morally wrong. Moving away from Max and Stevie, the panda said, "I'll be staying here to keep an eye on the kid. Hope you guys don't mind." "Wait, that kid's staying?" "Just for the night, I'm sure. There was some family drama, apparently." Well, Max completely understood that. "He's my friend," Stevie said, yanking her arms away from Max. "Kyle can stay for as long as he wants." "How old is that kid?" 17. Max raised an eyebrow, and Stevie gasped. "We're not that kind of friends." "You better not be. I'm sure Charlie wouldn't like that one bit." She started to return to the kitchen, but she realized that Stevie was heading toward the unsuspecting panda, who had turned away as he put his bag down on the couch. Terrified at what she might do next, Max rushed over and grabbed her sister around the waist. She lifted her up and carried her out of the living room and into the kitchen down the hall. Max dropped her and spun Stevie around to face her. "I'm going to say this once. Stay away from the panda." Stevie clapped her hands together and crowed, "But he's just so cute." About 15 minutes later, Britta returned, looking quite proud of herself. "All done." "Thanks. And just so you can relax, I paid 3 of the Mueller boys down the street to drive him to Philly. They'll drop him in the middle of the South Side. He'll have to fend for himself there." Shocked laughter exploded out of Charlie. "You—" She gave herself a moment to regain control. "You didn't have to do that." "I spent 2 minutes with that man. Trust me, it was a pleasure." She retrieved her bag and sticks. "You should stay for a while. I'll bring dinner back." "I don't want to put you guys out." "You're not."
But I know from personal experience, sometimes you need a break from your family, even the ones you love. Besides, some smart-ass kid is at your house now. You probably don't want to go back tonight." "What smart-ass kid?" "No idea, but he said he was a genius." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever." "Name's Kyle," one of the other players volunteered. "Oh." Charlie nodded. "Yeah, he actually is a genius. But from what my sister tells me, he is a lot of work. See? You don't want to go home. Stay here, relax, watch TV. I'll bring dinner back." She motioned to the players. "Come on, bitches." Charlie waited until they were all gone before informing Berg, "I love your sister. She has a way. Speaking of which, you don't have to stay if you don't want to." Looking over her shoulder, she asked the bear, "And if I want to stay?" "Then you are more than welcome." "I don't want to put you guys out, though." "You won't." The screen door opened and closed, and Dag stood on the porch, scratching his head and staring at a sheet of paper. "Where have you been?" his brother asked. "Taking orders." "Who was giving you orders?" Everybody." He took a step forward, still staring at the paper. "Charlie, if you are feeling moody and need to bake, there are, requests here." "Requests?" "Yes. Mrs. Franklin would like your cinnamon rolls. Mr. Grombeck would like your honey cake with white icing. But Tiny wants your honey pineapple cake." Poor Dag scratched his head in frustration. "I can't read my handwriting here." "Dag," she said, patting his leg, "it's okay. I'm not in the mood to bake. I've had a long day. I just want to do nothing." "Oh, okay. Good." Letting out a relieved breath, he leaned against the railing surrounding most of the porch and stayed there. Charlie didn't really think about it until Berg cleared his throat. "What?" Dag asked his brother. "Go away." Dag's gaze slowly bounced between Berg and Charlie. "Oh," he finally said, grinning. "Right. Got stuff to do." He went back into the house. "Yeah," Berg muttered. "Lots to do. Like look at porn online." "Don't judge. Sometimes one needs to check out bad homemade porn to feel alive." "Big porn fan, are you?" "Not particularly, except the Japanese animation stuff." "Seriously?" Berg asked, laughing. "Yeah. If I watch that stuff, then I'm not worrying, what do her parents think?" "Why don't I worry? Because the girl getting hardcore fucked while still managing to keep her nurse's hat on, an actual video, by the way, is just animation." "That's amazing logic." "Isn't it, though?" As promised, Britta brought dinner back, but thankfully not her fellow players. Those she'd sent off, so it was just the four of them. Charlie had checked in on her sisters by texting them, and the reply she got back must have been satisfactory because she didn't run over there to see what might be happening. Instead, she relaxed and hung out. She read the newspaper while Berg fought with his idiot brother about what to watch on TV. After dinner, she read the current events magazines Britta kept on the coffee table, so they looked like they were thoughtful bears, while Berg continued to fight with his idiot brother, as well as now his obnoxious sister, about what to watch on TV. The fact that the three of them still disagreed and fought like they used to when they were cubs didn't seem to bother Charlie, and Berg appreciated that. Then again, considering what went on around her at any given time, dealing with the Dunn triplets must have been like a vacation in comparison. Around midnight, Dag went out after getting a text from a she-cat a few streets over, and Britta took her laptop, and whoever she was direct messaging, up to her room. When the door closed behind her, Berg knew she was in for the night. That left him and Charlie sitting on opposite ends of the couch. He was just about to move over to be closer to her when the dog suddenly sauntered into the room, climbed over the coffee table, and into the middle of the couch. He stretched out fully so that his back feet nearly touched Berg's leg. His big head dropped into Charlie's lap, and she immediately began petting him while still reading her magazine. Berg wouldn't have been so pissed, though,
if his dog hadn't looked over at him and given what Berg could only guess was a dog smile. Or leer. The bastard was mocking him. Eventually, Charlie tossed the magazine aside and walked out. He heard the door to the first-floor bathroom close, and that's when Berg tapped the dog on his hind leg and motioned to the floor. Ignored, Berg tapped the dog again and added, "Get down." Now the animal growled at him. Fed up, Berg went ahead and pushed the dog off the couch. He hit the floor with a heavy thud, but he got up in seconds, turned, and threw himself at Berg. The two wrestled on the couch until they rolled off and slammed to the floor, their big bodies shoving the coffee table halfway across the room. Ahem. Berg cringed and glared down at the dog he'd finally pinned to the ground. And there went that rude, toothy dog grin again. "If you're going to wrestle him on the floor," Charlie said, standing over them, "you should really name him." "He started it. He wouldn't move." "He's a 200-pound dog. He doesn't have to move." Getting to his feet, Berg faced Charlie. "You're not leaving, are you?" "I have a meeting tomorrow with my bitchy aunt. For tea." She stuck her tongue out. "I hate tea. Then again, I hate my aunt." She rubbed her forehead. "But I know Stevie's going to be up all night with Kyle, talking about genius shit." "You can stay here for the night," Berg offered, and without moving anything else, Charlie lifted her left eyebrow on the couch, appropriately. "You don't mind?" "Not at all. Actually, I'll take the couch, and you can take my—" "I'm not taking your bed," she cut in, "although I appreciate the offer." "Actually," Berg said, trying hard not to outwardly cringe, "we have extra bedrooms, so you can have one of those." Charlie pushed a loose curl off her forehead before asking with a smile, "You offered me the couch and your bed before one of your extra bedrooms?" He cleared his throat. "I forgot we had them." "You forgot you had extra bedrooms?" "I didn't know I was so distracting." "Well, you are," he snapped back, embarrassed. Laughing, she said, "I'll take the couch." He frowned, no longer embarrassed, but confused. "Why? You're more than welcome to—" "Oh, I know." She placed her hand on his forearm, and her fingers were warm and dry, and he liked how they felt against his flesh. "But if someone breaks in, I can shoot them. Legally." "You're talking about your dad, aren't you?" "When am I not talking about my dad?" she asked, clearly disgusted. "But honestly, I wouldn't put it past him to drag his ass back here and start some shit. And I'd like to ensure he's greeted properly. So the couch is good." With a shrug, Berg went to get Charlie a new toothbrush and toothpaste. While she returned to the bathroom, he went upstairs and grabbed extra pillows and blankets from the closet. He returned to the living room and proceeded to make up her bed. "Blankets?" she asked when she walked back in. "It's like 80 degrees outside." "Trust me, in about an hour, Britta will turn the air up. She's a grizzly and hates the heat." "Okay," Charlie said on a chuckle. Berg finished and motioned to the couch. "Madam." "Thank you. For everything. I really mean it." "Any time." Charlie stepped close, and her arms slipped around his chest. She was hugging him, and Berg hugged her back, holding her tight against his body. And for once, for him, it wasn't an awkward thing because of height differences and not knowing fully what kind of relationship he really had with Charlie. There was no fumbling, no leaning down or stretching up. It was the most comfortable hug Berg had ever experienced with a woman who wasn't a close relative. And to his bear-like way of thinking, it was because Charlie fit perfectly into his life. She just didn't know it yet. Charlie pulled away first, giving him a wink and smile before dropping onto his couch. She kicked off her sneakers and stretched out, letting out a big yawn as she relaxed into the cushions. With a nod, Berg forced himself to walk away from her, leaving Charlie alone on that couch. He turned off all the other lights in the living room, letting her handle the one by her head. He was about to go down the hallway to the stairs when he heard Charlie giggle a little. He looked back and saw that his stupid dog had gotten on the couch with her. He was by her feet now, letting her rest them on his big head. Psst. Berg motioned to the dog to come, but he wouldn't move. Psst. He's not bothering me, Charlie said, her back to the room. You can leave him. But Berg didn't want to leave the bastard. He wanted to be the one that Charlie was putting her feet on. He wanted to be curled up with her on the couch for the night. Who knew he'd ever see that damn dog as a romantic rival? But here they were. Okay, well, if he gets on your nerves, feel free to kick him off. He spit out the last part between clenched teeth, his gaze locked with the dog's. Will do. Night, Berg. Night, Charlie. Berg made his way up to his room, sat on his bed, and stared at absolutely nothing until his sister walked in. She wore one of the team hockey shirts which reached down to her knees. Smirking, she said, You dumbass. You left her with the dog? Groaning, Berg fell back onto his bed, his sister's laughter giving him a headache. Chapter 17. They suddenly decided to move her in the middle of the night. Men in body armor and shielded helmets, so that she couldn't see their faces. They burst into her cell, but seemed thrown off to find her awake and sitting on her bed, feet on the floor, elbows on her knees, and hands clasped in front of her. She'd been waiting, and they knew it. The group paused for a brief second before moving on. Someone grabbed her by the back of the neck and shoved her to the ground on her face. They pinned her there before cuffing her arms and legs and then adding the chains. They blindfolded her and put a leather bit in her mouth to keep her from biting. Once done, they lifted her up and proceeded to carry her out. There were no catcalls from other cells, no sounds at all, but she could hear the increased heartbeats, the panicked breathing, the scent of fear. All those men around her waiting for her to do something. Yes, she was in the men's prison, a decision made after the third body was found. They couldn't pin the murders on her, but they wanted to. Of course, it didn't help that the bodies stopped dropping in the women's cells once she was gone. Mary MacKilligan was not taken to another part of the prison as she expected, the crazy ward they all quietly called it, where they put the worst of the worst. They had put her there once before, but it had not ended well. She'd dig holes through the concrete and into the other cells around hers, and then she'd have some fun. Get back to her cell, hide the hole, and wait until the guards came by to do a cell check. She'd smile when she'd hear the gasps of shock, or the screaming. She loved when there was screaming. They'd put her back in the regular cells, not because they had no evidence she'd done anything. They never had evidence, but because she and the Gov had come to an agreement. She'd stop killing, and he'd let her stay in the regular cells. She'd agreed, with a smile. He'd cried after she'd left his office. She didn't know why. She'd kept her promise. She hadn't killed anyone. Why bother with all the mess when she could get them to do the job to themselves? But no, they didn't take her anywhere else in the prison. Instead, they carried her out altogether and threw her into the back of what she suspected was a van. Men came in with her, the back door closed, the engine started, and they were moving. No one spoke around her. They'd learned not to. She remembered voices, remembered conversations, and then she used them against those people just because she could. She didn't need a reason. She'd always bored easy. They drove for hours. She could sense the sun had come up when the van finally stopped. The doors were opened, several gloved hands picked her up, and threw her out of the van. The doors quickly closed, and she heard the squeal of tires as they drove off and left her. Not that it mattered. She could get out of her chains any time she wanted. She'd just never bothered. Where was the fun in that? She gave herself 5 minutes, as she was always big on testing her skills. The last chain hit the ground, and she'd reached up to take off her blindfold when she heard, "That was impressive." Mary smiled around her bit and dropped the blindfold. She blinked against the light until she could see the men standing in front of her. American men,
heavily armed, except for the one she guessed was the leader. He was older, wore jeans and a thick blue sweater, but still had that military haircut, that military bearing.
"You going to kill me here,
she asked. "John Mitchell. And that would really piss off my clients. They're very interested in meeting you."
"Meeting me for what?"
He crouched down in front of her and said, "They need your help to hurt people. They've heard you're good at that."
"Very good."
"And a chance to get even with your family, to get even with the ones who left you to rot in prison." Mary felt it snake up her back, like an electric current, making her fingers tingle and her nipples hard. The excitement. How she felt when she stole jewels or broke a bloke's arm or cut someone's throat in the dark, when they never knew she was even in the room. She got to her feet, cracked her neck, and waited. The man motioned toward their vehicle, and Mary followed, smiling.